Chapter 386. It was the beginning of summer in the capital. A sudden gust of wind blew through the capital, bringing with it a patch of dark clouds. The wind and clouds stirred with each other. Not long after, it began to rain. Separated by the fine, needle-like curtain of rain, everything in the world seemed to be covered in a layer of illusion. In that illusion, the head eunuch, Zhao Bin, walked into the Supreme Court with an imperial edict, announcing that Tan Siwei would enter the Golden Imperial Hall for trial. Wearing heavy shackles, Tan Siwei stepped through the threshold of the Supreme Court. He slowly turned his head and looked at the words "Justice" and "Justice" that Emperor Gaozu had inscribed on the screen wall. A self-mocking smile appeared on his face. He then turned his head and walked further and further away, finally going in the opposite direction. In the heavy rain, Madame Tan braved the rain to arrive. Before the carriage had even stopped, she hurriedly jumped down. More than 20 years ago, before Madame Tan had been married, she had been a famous talented woman in the capital. She was gentle and well-mannered, and after marrying into the Tan family, she was even more graceful and proper. Everyone in the circle of noble women in the capital praised her for being gentle and virtuous. No one had ever seen her lose her temper, and no one had ever heard her speak loudly. She was always so kind and gentle. However, this exemplary wife and loving mother was now like an angry lioness. She bared her teeth and extended her claws, recklessly standing in front of Tan Siwei. Tan Sixian anxiously chased after her, holding an umbrella. She wanted to persuade her, but Madame Tan couldn't do anything. In the heavy rain, she glared hatefully at Zhao Bin. She glared at these enemies from the inner palace who were trying to steal her son. She angrily said, "Who dares to take my son away?" Zhao Bin held the yellow handkerchief in his hand and said in a sharp voice, "Prime Minister, this is an imperial edict from His Majesty, ordering the second young master to immediately enter the palace for trial. Look, the imperial edict is still here. You must watch carefully. If you dare to do anything that goes against His Majesty's orders, even the Prime Minister's golden signboard will collapse one day. I advise you to think twice before you act, lest you fail to protect your son and instead become a death sentence. My son isn't the murderer. Why are you arresting him? I don't have time to chat with you about this. Whether he is guilty or not depends on whether he admits it or not, and whether His Majesty believes it or not. How can a woman like you interfere?" After Zhao Bin finished sneering, he still cared about her status as the Prime Minister's wife, so he took a slow breath and said, "Of course, Madame Tan doesn't need to be too worried. Right now, she's only going to the palace to listen to the trial, and she hasn't been directly convicted yet. Perhaps second young master will be released if he is innocent." Madame Tan was like a mountain all by herself. Go to the palace and listen to the trial? Do you think that I, Wang Saiwan, have read thousands of books for nothing? Had she been the mistress of the Prime Minister's manor for more than 10 years for nothing? The 5 days promised to the southern Yang kingdom is approaching, and everyone is looking forward to the appearance of a scapegoat. Finally, there is one. Even if my son is not the murderer, in order to appease the anger of the southern Yang kingdom, he will definitely be convicted. If you want to take him away, you have to step over my dead body first. Seeing that the deadline set by His Majesty was approaching, Zhao Bin was burning with anxiety. He narrowed his eyes and said, "Mrs. Tan, if you continue to be so unreasonable, don't blame me for being impolite." Someone come. Seeing this, Tan Sixian hurriedly stepped forward to appease him, repeatedly apologizing and asking him to calm down. On the other hand, Tan Siwei's face was drenched with rain. The cold rain drenched his hair and extinguished his previous vigor. He said, "Mother, you should go back quickly. The rain is so heavy, and your body is so weak. What if you catch a cold? As for this case, I really did commit the crime. I have no way to refute it. Please just pretend that you never had a son like me." Chapter 387. Madame Tan shook her head in resistance. Her voice was full of sobs. "Wei, my silly child, why did you confess? You must have your own difficulties, right? Tell them quickly. Tell them that you were coerced. You're not the murderer." Tan Siwei's eyes reddened. He looked away, speechless. Madame Tan suddenly had an epiphany. "I know. Are you doing this for me? Her lips trembled violently. I get it. My silly child, you're really. Mother will go to the palace with you. I'm going to tell them everything. The murderer is definitely not you. But just as Madame Tan was about to blurt out, Tan Siwei roared and interrupted her. Mother, do you want me to die here right now? He resolutely closed his eyes and pried Madame Tan's hands off him one by one. He took the initiative to walk toward Zhao Bin. There's no such thing as coercion, and there's no unspeakable reason. I killed him, so I killed him. The sins that I've committed with my blood will be repaid with my blood. If you still want me to live for a moment longer, then go back immediately. Don't care about anything, don't say anything. In the future, please treat Qiongwei as your own daughter. Take good care of elder brother and father. The family will be harmonious and happy, just like when I was here. Siwei, come back. Don't go, you can't go. Madame Tan still wanted to stop him, but Prime Minister Tan, who came after hearing the news, immediately stopped her. He hugged Madame Tan tightly in his arms, his eyes red. Siwen, you can't go against the Emperor's orders. My child. Madame Tan watched as Tan Siwei was taken into the carriage. The horse galloped in the rain, sending him in the direction of the palace. He was on a path of no return. She collapsed on the ground. After a long time, she struggled out of Prime Minister Tan's arms and laughed inexplicably. There were tears in her laughter. Is this retribution? It's retribution, right? The sins that I've committed back then have finally come back to haunt me. But, why don't you just punish me directly? Mother. Seeing her like this, Tan Xishen's eyes were filled with worry and sympathy. He pulled up the hem of his shirt that had become heavy from the rain and hurriedly ran towards Mrs. Tan to hold an umbrella for her. However, Madame Tan slapped his hand away. In the heavy rain, she said, you've been wanting to see my retribution all these years, haven't you? Now that retribution has come, are you happy? Tan Xishen's usual flirtatious smile froze at that moment. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He couldn't hold on to the umbrella in his hand, and it was blown into the muddy water by the wind and rain. Who in this world is without sin? Greed, deceit, stupidity, murder, theft, lust, lies, two tongues, evil mouth, beautiful words. Every single one of us here is a sinner. None of us are good people. Evil people. Let us rely on each other for survival. Mrs. Tan was still smiling. She staggered a few steps before her legs gave way and she fell beside Ning Shu's feet. Mrs. Tan. Ning Shu hurriedly helped her up and found that she had already fainted. She looked up at the Prime Minister and Tan Xixian who were surrounding her in shock. The rain had become heavier at some point, making the illusion in front of her even more blurry and heavy. Miss, do you mean that he's another Zhu Xiong? For the sake of Li Yi in his heart, he didn't hesitate to lose his reputation and be cursed by thousands of people and was willing to bear such a heavy crime. Forsythia frowned and widened her eyes. Ning Shu rubbed her sore eyebrows. This is my current guess. Forsythia was puzzled, but the witnesses and evidence clearly point to Tan Shaoqing. Do we have to believe them just based on Mrs. Tan's words of protection? They're mother and son, so they'll definitely try their best to get rid of suspicion for him, so her words may not be trustworthy. Besides, other than those vague words, we can't get any useful information at all. There is one. Ning Shu relaxed her eyebrows and nodded with certainty. The Tan family is hiding a big secret, and this secret involves many people. If this secret isn't solved, this case won't be solved. His Majesty is interrogating him today, but due to the Tan family's status and Tan Shaoqing's sensitive identity as a court official, he won't be convicted too quickly. Let's go, we'll investigate immediately. Seize this last bit of time. Chapter 388. Where are we going to find the secret of the Tan family? Forsythia trotted behind Ning Shu and felt that it was very tricky. Prime Minister Tan would never tell us. Otherwise, the current situation wouldn't have developed. Ning Shu led the horse out. After a moment of contemplation, she made a decision. Let's go to the thatched hut first. Since the case is more and more closely related to the Xue family, let's go back more than 20 years and see what happened back then. After a rainstorm, the sky gradually cleared up. The horses' hooves splashed through half of the capital and rushed out of the city again. Pushing open the rotten wooden door, Ning Shu slowed down this time and carefully looked at the furnishings of the thatched hut. There were two dense small gardens in the courtyard. One garden was densely packed with thin bamboo, and the other garden was lush with willow trees. Although the willow trees were barren and overgrown with weeds, she could still vaguely tell from the broken branches and flowers that this used to be a small flower bed. There were also a few small stone benches set up by the flower bed. Walking along the cobblestone path, she could see the main door of the thatched hut. The furnishings in the thatched hut were simple. Whether it was the windows, the wooden door, the wardrobe, or the bed frame, they were all made of the cheapest pine wood. But even though it was cheap, there was always a little hidden meaning in the inconspicuous places of the house, such as the small clay vase on the small table, the half-broken window flower pasted on the window, or the guqin lying quietly under the window. It was not difficult to see that the former owner of this house was an elegant person who knew how to have fun. There was still a drop of dried blood left on the couch, which was left there by Xiaoho Qing a few hours ago. Her heart ached again. Ning Shu closed her eyes and forced herself not to think about that matter anymore. She focused on what was in front of her. She glanced around and stretched out her hand to wipe the table. This place is old, but have you noticed that there is not much dust? The things in the house are also neatly arranged. Someone must have come here every once in a while to clean up. The decoration of the house is simple but not shabby. Many small details are ingenious, such as the stone benches in the flowerbed outside, the window flowers, and the small vase. It shows that this house once had a very qualified mistress. There are a few baby toys like rattles on the bedside table. She should have a child. Then Ning Shu opened the wardrobe and frowned. Most of the clothes in the wardrobe are women's clothes, mainly made of coarse cloth. There are 2 or 3 infant clothes, but there aren't many, and the biggest one is only half a year old. Where did her child go? She continued to read. There are also a few sets of adult men's clothes. However, the aura of men living here is not strong. Although there are 2 sets of bowls and chopsticks, one of the bowls has been used for a long time and has 2 or 3 small cracks. The other set is not damaged. The same goes for the wooden chopsticks. One pair is old and the other pair is new. Forsythia, what did you find? I've searched through everything I could find, but I didn't find any tokens or letters that could prove my identity. There wasn't even a handwriting. I can only say that the previous owner of this place was too good at hiding his identity. He must have done it on purpose. Ah, I think I saw a sword under the bed. Forsythia hurriedly lay down on the ground and reached out with a dirty face. She pulled the sword out of the sheath. As soon as the sword was unsheathed, a green sword light flashed. Forsythia felt a chill in her heart when she saw it. Hey, why does this sword look so gloomy? It's making me crazy just by looking at it. Ning Shu glanced at the sword and her eyes fell on the family crest on the hilt. This is a killing sword. Its previous owner once took it to the battlefield and killed countless enemy soldiers. Later, it was passed down to the next generation. Its owner used it to poke 8 bloody holes in the enemy's body and made him pay with blood. Forsythia blinked. Miss, you mean that Xuehongyi lived here after she died? Ning Shu nodded. That's right. After she died, she lived here for another 12 years until she completely left the world for some reason. During this time, she had a child with someone. Forsythia said, who is it? What does it have to do with the Tan family? Ning Shu didn't say anything. She quietly picked up the man's clothes and shook it off. She placed it on the wall for comparison and then estimated the man's height. Look at this body. Doesn't it look like a person? This height is above average for men, but there are millions of people in the capital, so it's a bit hard to recognize. Miss, from your expression, it seems like you already have doubts in your heart. Don't keep me in suspense, hurry up and tell me. Forsythia was very anxious and tried her best to act coquettishly. Ning Shu turned around, her dark eyes shining like the stars in the night sky. She slowly said, what if the scholar who secretly promised Xuehongyi to marry him was the current Prime Minister Tan? Chapter 389. What? Miss, this is not a joke. Hearing Ning Shu's shocking speculation, Forsythia was so scared that she stuttered. In this court, anyone could be smeared, except for Prime Minister Tan. His reputation was too good, and his character was too good. Not only was he loved by the people, even the emperor relied on him. Take the drought in Hanjiang Prefecture for example. The people did not have enough to eat, and there were starving people on the road. It was like purgatory on earth. The relief funds disappeared mysteriously, and riots broke out. The emperor and the court officials were helpless. Only Prime Minister Tan volunteered to go to the front line. He knelt down for the country and the people, soothing the pain and anger in the hearts of the disaster victims. Then, he ate and lived with the disaster victims for dozens of days. He saved people and finally put out the riot. When it was about to ignite, he saved the lives of countless people. Such a person was called the backbone of the country. Who would dare to poke at his spine? Who would agree to this if they asked the millions of people in Hanjiang Prefecture? Ning Shu was not ignorant, but she said, sometimes, the more impossible it seems, the more likely it is. I am not speculating without reason. Look at this dress. Ordinary people are right-hand, so the right sleeve has more traces of wear than the left. However, this dress is symmetrical on both sides, so the wear is similar. Coincidentally, our Prime Minister Tan caught His Majesty's eye many years ago during the imperial court examination because of his ability to draw the bow with both hands at the same time. Forsythia was shocked, my God. But, what if there are other people who can use both hands flexibly? Ning Shu walked to the window and gently plucked the guqin that no one had appreciated for a long time. It was unexpectedly clear and melodious, and the lingering sound lingered. Closely related to this case, being protected by Tan Siwei in every way possible, the age must match, and the hands must be dexterous. The range of suspects who meet so many criteria at the same time is really not wide. However, a nameless piece of clothing was not enough to be used as conclusive evidence. If they wanted to conclude the case, they would need more evidence. Ning Shu put the dress, shuejiajian, the rattledrum, and a pair of tiger-headed shoes into a bag and went straight to Shi City. If he wanted to confirm the identity of the scholar who had fallen in love with Xue Hongyi, he had to find the old man from back then. However, one basin of cold water after another poured down on her. The people in the brothel had a short lifespan to begin with, and there were not many left who knew about the past. The only one left was the procuress, who was locked up in prison and refused to tell the truth. The sun was about to set, and the sunset glow was golden. After several days of running around, Ning Shu stood at the bustling crossroads and felt a little dizzy. She closed her eyes, calmed her heart, and organized the fragmented information in her mind bit by bit. The fragments were like waves splashing in the white river, and under the snow-white waves, the scales of the swimming fish shone with silver light under the sunlight and the river water. She suddenly thought of something and said, "Has the procuress of Zunfang Tai been interrogated alone these past 2 days?" Forsythia said, "No, but I had a stomachache last night. It was so painful that I rolled around on the ground. We were so scared that we begged the jailer for help. The jailer saw that she was foaming at the mouth and looked really scary, so he carried her out to see a doctor. He only came back in the middle of the night. Was it Susu and the others who took care of her after that?" "Of course, I've also helped out." Ning Shu knew what was going on. "I know how Tan Siwei passed the message to Bai Susu and discussed the details. Tan Siwei's acting was too good. He looked like a warm and gentle person, like a soft piece of tofu. He was not aggressive at all, but this time, his acting was so good that he almost fooled her with one trick after another. Tan Shaoqing, you used me to send yourself to the executioner's knife. Do you want me to regret it for the rest of my life?" Forsythia couldn't wait to ask, "What about the murderer? Who is the murderer?" Ning Shu's eyes flashed, "I have a guess, but I don't have any evidence." "It's just a guess." "Forsythia, I need to trouble you with something. Go to a place for me and ask about something." "Miss, I've become fat from lying in prison. Tell me, I'll go to any place." Chapter 390. Shaking the rattledrum in her hand, Ning Shu walked slowly along the Chaobai River. She walked past the White Horse Alley and under the dense willow tree in the White Horse Alley. According to the neighbors, Li Yi was humiliated by the envoy there on the 7th day of the 5th lunar month, and it was also the place where the case started. She walked past the Shui market where Li Yi and Bai Susu met and supported each other when they were young. It was still bustling with activity, but there was no lively girl who liked to laugh and sell flowers. She walked past Kangping Square and saw Li Yi abandoned in disheveled clothes at the entrance of the alley outside the square. Only drops of desperate tears mourned her broken life. Finally, they arrived at the small courtyard of the Bai family. The courtyard was not big, and the walls were mottled with green vines. Bai Hong and his wife's sighs mixed with coughs could be heard from within the courtyard walls. Ning Shu stood silently under the green tiles and white walls for a long time. On a certain night in August last year, a man in brocade clothes drove Bai Susu home in a carriage. When he opened the door, he used his left hand. Was there a possibility that the man in brocade clothes was not Wan Chang'an, but someone else? Could it be Prime Minister Tan? It should not be. The way a young man and a middle-aged man walked was different. Even if his face could not be seen clearly, it should not be mistaken. But how could it be so coincidental that there were two people who were accustomed to using their left hand? Also, Li Yi was humiliated in the White Horse Alley and taken away by the Tan family's carriage. Why was she still disheveled when she was found by the neighbors the next morning? This was not in line with Tan Siwei's character. Or perhaps, the man that night was not him at all? Or had she been guessing in the wrong direction all this time? What happened that night was not what they imagined at all. If only Xiahou Qing was by her side. That person was a man of few words, but he would always be able to find an alternative path for her when she was stuck in a deadlock in her thoughts. Xiahou Qing, Xiahou Qing. Her heart ached slightly when she thought of this name. She looked up at the moon in the sky and prayed silently. Are you awake now? You must be fine. You must be fine. No matter how many doubts she had in her heart, time still rushed forward without a care. The celestial being pulling flowers stopped the last ray of the sunset. The flowing clouds flew away, and the moon and stars were about to appear. The people along the Chaobai River lit up the lamps in front of their doors one by one. The lantern flame flickered and fell into the waves, shaking a river of gold. There was only one house whose door had not been lit yet. It was pitch black and looked particularly out of place on the brightly lit riverbank. When Ning Shu walked past, she inadvertently glanced at it. Curses could be heard coming from inside the house. A woman wearing a headscarf stood with her hands on her hips like an angry teapot, cursing at her submissive husband. What light, what light? Don't you see how poor you are? Who do you think you have the spare money to light a lantern for? Back then, I was also a flower in this square. How could I have blindly married a good-for-nothing like you? This is really bad luck from 8 lifetimes. Her husband quickly begged her to calm down and lower her voice. The more the woman scolded, the more energetic she became. What are you afraid of losing face for? You have the face to live off a woman, so why would I be afraid of being heard by the neighbors? Pay. You men, none of you are good things. 2 days ago, that little beast was also the same. He was dressed like a noble, but I didn't expect him to talk like a fart. I worked hard to hide his identity. We agreed on 300 taels of silver, but he sent me away with 50 taels of silver. No, I can't take this lying down. Sooner or later, I will go to the government and sue him until his reputation is completely ruined. The cowardly man immediately covered his wife's mouth. Ayo, don't talk nonsense. That young master's identity is not ordinary at first glance. He is definitely not an ordinary person. People like us, he can pinch us to death with just one finger. We must not offend him. Moreover, he also gave us 50 taels of silver. It is enough to feed us for 2 years. You should know when to stop. I heard that this Bai family's girl is involved in a shocking case. If we are also involved, then we will not be able to bear the consequences. The woman thought about it and also felt a trace of fear, but she still stubbornly said, "What are you afraid of? Since I was born, I have always known how to write the word fear. If you have the ability, then come and catch me." Humph. The door was kicked open with a bang. A golden token came in front of them, I am His Majesty's Imperial Envoy, Ning Shu, to solve the case. Why haven't you all quickly knelt down and surrender?" The woman's face trembled. Her knees went soft and she knelt on the ground. Chapter 391. Under the dense moonlight, Ning Shu cast a long shadow under her feet. She held the golden order in her hand, looking imposing. Amused, she looked at the woman who was kneeling on the ground and shaking like a sieve. She coldly said, "Do you know how serious the punishment is for falsifying a confession and delaying a case? The lightest punishment is 50 slaps and a fine of 20. The heaviest punishment is 100 beatings and 5 years of exile. The heaviest punishment is that you are an accomplice of the criminal and should be sentenced to death. It seems that this auntie's life is very tough. You don't know how to write the word fear. Then, how many strokes does the word death have? Do you want me to teach you on behalf of His Majesty?" When the woman heard this, her face immediately turned gloomy. She regretted her actions and said, "No, no need. This commoner knows how to write the word fear. I know it very well. Just now, this commoner was brainless and boasted shamelessly, offending the Imperial Envoy. I beg the Imperial Envoy to give this commoner a way out. Please don't arrest me. I beg you, this commoner will slap myself." Ning Shu sneered, "You want to avoid prison with a few slaps? You're dreaming. When you accepted bribes and concealed the truth, did you not expect this day to come? This commoner was only momentarily blinded by the money. The Imperial Envoy doesn't know that this commoner has suffered." The woman cried and pretended to be pitiful. "Money, I will take out 50 taels of silver without missing a single tael. Also, I will tell you what I saw that night without missing a single word. I beg you to give this commoner another chance. This commoner swears that if I dare to conceal anything and deceive the Imperial Envoy again, this commoner's family will die a horrible death." Ning Shu crossed her arms in front of her chest and calmly watched her act. "Then tell me. If what you say satisfies me, perhaps this Imperial Envoy can consider it." Good, good, good. Imperial Envoy, please sit down. This commoner will tell you. My family lives diagonally across from the Bai family. Last August, when I came out to pour some night incense, I saw with my own eyes a young master in embroidered clothes send the Bai family's girl home. At that time, it was already in the middle of the night. The Bai family's girl was also acting mysteriously, so I watched for a while. However, I only watched and didn't take it to heart. Who would have thought that a few days ago, 2 groups of people came to inquire about that matter? 2 groups of people? Ning Shu frowned. When and who were they? The first group came the day before yesterday. They said that they were from the government and were here to inquire about the Bai family. At that time, I was possessed and had some thoughts that I shouldn't have. I only said a few words and didn't tell the whole story. Not long after the officials left, the second group of people came. It was a young master in embroidered clothes. He gave me 50 taels of silver and told me to keep my mouth shut and not talk nonsense. He also told me to help them cover up a lie and said that after the matter was settled, the remaining 250 taels would be handed over to me immediately. Thus, when the envoy came the second time, I pushed the blame to young master Wan Zhong'an. I didn't expect that after waiting for a long time, I still didn't get the rest of the money. So I cursed a few times in anger. You heard it. The woman's intestines were about to turn green with regret. She was crying for herself. In the second wave, what does the silk-robed man look like? Is he the one who sent Bai Susu home last August? The woman nodded her head like a rattledrum. Yes, 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 I'm sure it's him. Although I'm a commoner and don't know many words, my eyes and memory are as sharp as snow. When the young master came the day before yesterday, he deliberately wore a mask to hide his identity. Only his eyes were exposed. But his height, posture, and voice were definitely the same as the young master that night. You mean that you also heard the young master speak that night? Yes, I was curious, so I went to the east wall of the Bai family and leaned against the wall to eavesdrop for a while. After the young master entered the Bai family, the sickly Bai Hong excitedly got up from the bed as if he had seen an important guest. He knelt down and shouted something about young master. The young master said something like, "General Bai, please get up quickly. You've suffered for so many years. I'm here to visit you on behalf of my grandfather and mother." After listening for a while, I panicked and ran away. Ning Shu's heart skipped a beat. What does the young master look like? How does he dress? Tell me everything. His appearance is thin and tall. He's a bit taller than my husband. He looks like a scholar. The way he talks is also quite elegant. I really can't see his face clearly. The woman frowned and thought for a while. Suddenly, she said, "His exposed eyes are very special. How do I put it? Oh, right. They're like the handsome guy who plays Pan and in the opera. He has a pair of romantic peach blossom eyes." Chapter 392. When Heaven's Inquisition came looking for her, he saw Ning Shu holding a rattledrum, lost in thought under the willow tree. Seeing Heaven's Inquisition, Ning Shu immediately came back to her senses and asked, "How is your Shizzy? Has he woken up?" Heaven's Inquisition wiped the sweat off his forehead. "Oh, I'm here to tell you about this. Shizzy woke up after using the 9 Revolutions life-prolonging pill, but is not in good spirits. After waking up for a while, he fell asleep again. Now Huemore and the doctors are guarding by his side. They don't even dare to blink." Ning Shu closed her eyes and exhaled heavily. The tip of her nose was slightly sour because of excitement, but more than that, she was happy that she had regained what she had lost. "Great, great, Xiahou Qing, it's really, really great," Heaven's Inquisition said. "When Shizzy woke up, he asked about the situation of the case and ordered me to come and help you. Lady Ning, if there's anything I can help with, just let me know." Ning Shu's nose was even more sour. Why was this person so nosy? He was still seriously injured, but he still had the time to worry about her. "Xiahou Qing, are you deliberately making me cry? You're so annoying, don't you know that?" At this moment, she had 10,000 impulses to go back and see how he was doing, but her rationality told her that she couldn't. The case was at the most critical moment, and any hesitation would make all the previous efforts go to waste. She had promised that she would definitely get to the bottom of this case, and then bring the final mystery to him. After listening to Ning Shu's simple explanation of the current situation, he was stunned. "Tan Xixian? You mean the polite and amiable eldest son of the Tan family, Tan Xixian? This is too scary. This is simply too scary." Ning Shu's expression was also dignified. The current situation was getting more and more complicated, and it had completely exceeded her expectations. If Tan Xixian was the blood of Xue Hongyi and Prime Minister Tan, then Tan Siwei's behavior of taking the blame for his brother could be explained. Then, the person who injured Xiahou Qing in the thatched hut and immediately ran away should be him. In this world, other than his biological parents, perhaps only blood-related brothers and sisters could make Tan Siwei disregard everything, break his principles, and risk his life to save them. But what about the person who knocked Zhu Yang down that day and cut off a strip of cloth from his body? Whether it was Zhu Yang or the old woman selling embroidery nearby, they all said that the man was not tall, shorter than Tan Xixian by a bit, and that the man was good at using his left hand. Previously, she had mistakenly thought that there were only 2 left hands in this case, but now she realized that she had miscalculated. It was very likely that there were 3. What kind of connection was hidden between the 3 of them? What kind of fog had they set up to prevent others from seeing the source of the matter? Ning Shu muttered, "At present, we lack evidence. Tan Siwei is determined to take the blame. Just based on Tan Xixian's visit to the Bai family last year, we can't lock onto him as a suspect. If we want to be sure, we must first investigate Tan Xixian's background. It would be best to investigate the whole story of Xue Hongyi's humiliation. I have a feeling that we are not far from the truth. Madame Tan's behavior in the rain was too strange. She kept questioning Tan Xixian. All these years, you have been waiting to see my retribution, right? Now that retribution is here, are you happy?" She was clearly saying that she was at fault for Xue Hongyi's case. Heaven's Inquisition patted his chest without hesitation. "Gossiping is my specialty. Leave it to me." Tianwen came and went without a trace, like a minor bird, flapping its wings and disappearing into the night. Ning Shu picked up a branch and squatted on the ground, combing it one by one. If Tan Xixian had worked hard for 20 years just to avenge his mother's family, then so far, the maid who betrayed Xue Hongyi had died, the chief culprit who ruined the Xue family, the envoy from southern Yang, had died a horrible death. Madame Tan, who had once taken away the love of Xue Hongyi's life, was currently suffering the suffering of her only bloodline. The only enemy left for the Xue family was the loyal and brave Zhu family who colluded with the envoy from southern Yang to falsely accuse the Xue family. Could it be that Tan Xixian's last target? Chapter 393. How's the situation in the palace? After returning to the Supreme Court, Ning Shu immediately inquired about Tan Siwei's situation. Deputy Minister Zheng said, His Majesty personally interrogated Official Tan, and Official Tan confessed. His Majesty was furious. The 5-day deadline promised to Southern Yang's deputy envoy is approaching. His Majesty has already issued an order to summon Southern Yang's deputy envoy to the palace tomorrow afternoon to jointly interrogate Official Tan and completely conclude this case. Ning Shu rubbed her temples. Tomorrow afternoon, there were less than 16 hours left. There really wasn't much time left. Deputy Minister Zheng saw that she had just returned and was about to leave, so he hurriedly chased after her. Lady Ning, it's already so late. Where are you going? Ning Shu didn't even turn her head. I'm going to the Prime Minister's residence. With so little time left, if the mountain didn't come to her, then she would go to the mountain. She didn't believe that the Tan family was an impenetrable wall that couldn't even find a crack. Hey! But the curfew has already passed. Before Deputy Minister Zheng's voice could reach her ears, it had already been swept far away by the wind by her ponytail. In the night breeze, the lights were bright, and the summer was slightly tipsy. The warm wind urged the horses to gallop faster. Under the bright, mirror-like moonlight above her head and the swaying lights in the mortal world, Ning Shu's expression was resolute. She urged her horse to leap over the green bricks of the capital's wide streets, like the wind and like a dragon. When she reached Zhuqiu Street, a group of soldiers suddenly stopped her. It was Yong Chengwei. Stop. Who is Nightwalker? Ning Shu pulled on the reins and replied in a clear voice, Duke Ning's eldest legitimate daughter, Ning Shu. I've been ordered by the Emperor to investigate the case of the sudden death of the envoy. The leader of the guards said, Lady Ning, the curfew has already passed. If you don't have an official seal, you can't go to the capital at night. Yesterday, when she fell into the Xue family's ancestral tomb, the only official seal that His Majesty bestowed upon her was also lost in the chaos. Previously, the fake one was a carrot carving that she casually took out under Lian Qiao's orders to fool people. It was not a problem to fool the market aunties, but if she wanted to fool the Longcheng guards, she was afraid that her face would be exposed. Ning Shu thought for a moment and said, I have an important case at hand and forgot to bring the token with me. I will definitely bring it later. Please make an exception. This is the law, no one can defy it. Ning Shu frowned. Just as she was thinking about how to fool them, a voice pushed through the crowd. It was as steady as a chime. Let her go. Yong Chengwei dismounted one by one and bowed to his former master on one knee. Your humble servant greets the 6th prince. Behind the crowd, Xiao Yuni slowly walked out from the dark blue night. He had taken off his sharp armor and was wearing a white robe that made his aura gentler. Only his cold eyes were still his true self. Seeing that the Yong Chengwei were hesitating, Xiao Yuni put his hands behind his back and said coldly with a frown, Can't you understand my words? I said, let her go. Yes. Yong Chengwei looked at each other and finally gave him face and let Ning Shu go. Lady Ning, please. Ning Shu nodded in thanks. When she passed by Xiao Yuni, she thought for a moment and still dismounted. Thank you, Your Highness. Xiao Yuni's lips twitched. I said the night before that if you need anything, you can come and find me at any time. It's just a sentence. Why are you being so polite with me? Are you deliberately trying to keep a distance from me? Don't worry, I'm not so shameless as to cling to you. Ning Shu smiled awkwardly when her thoughts were exposed. Xiao Yuni said lightly, there are more than one Yong Chengwei patrolling the city. There will be more in front. Let's go. Where do you want to go? I'll send you there. Chapter 394. He was so open and honest. If she continued to refuse, it would seem that she was too petty. Besides, time was tight and it was not the time to be pretentious. Ning Shu nodded. Then I'll have to trouble your highness. Yong Chengwei brought a horse over. Xiao Yuni jumped onto the horse and pulled the reins, walking side by side with Ning Shu under the gentle moonlight. Xiao Yuni said in a low voice, I heard that you fell into a trap these 2 days and met with danger. Ning Shu bit her lower lip and nodded slightly. Yes, but with Heir Xiaohou lending a helping hand, I am not in any trouble. Xiao Yuni glanced at her and said, seeing that you can still come out in the middle of the night and are so lively, I know that you're fine. What about Xiahou Qing? Is he dead? Ning Shu's willowy eyebrows suddenly furrowed. Prince Xiahou is blessed with great fortune and will definitely be fine. Sixth Highness, please pay some attention to your words. Seeing her like this, Xiao Yuni laughed. The way you're protecting him now is very similar to how you defended me when I was bullied by fourth brother and fifth brother in the palace. I remember that the fiercest time was when I was 11 and you were 8. During the equestrian class, the master taught us to ride and shoot. Father was also present and ordered us brothers to have a small test. I couldn't control myself and wanted to show off in front of father and win against the two of them. After school, they worked together to coax me into a cold palace and beat me up with the servants. After that, they accused me of being disrespectful to elder brother, so I didn't dare to complain in front of father. This was not a glorious thing and I didn't want you to know, but I didn't expect you to be so careful and not be able to hide it from you. You were so angry that you thought of a trick the next day. You lied to them that you saw a white spirit beast in the imperial garden and coaxed them to catch it and give it to father. I didn't expect you to hide a hornet's nest behind the rockery and stung their faces with poisonous needles, making them roll on the bed and cry for a month. Speaking of the past, Ning Shu was suddenly speechless. She said in a low voice, I was naughty and absurd in the past. I made your highness laugh. Xiao Yuni smiled faintly. Don't laugh at me. I have nothing now and only these past events can make me feel better. I should be the one laughing at you. His tone was so calm and his smile was so light, but it was like a lancet had cut Ning Shu's heart slightly. There was nothing else, only a sigh. It was a good thing that Xiao Yuni did not dwell on this topic and the two of them continued to rush on their journey silently. From Vermilion Bird Street to the Prime Minister's manor, they met 2 more groups of Yong Chengwei along the way, but Xiao Yuni came out to chase them away. When they arrived in front of the Prime Minister's manor, Xiao Yuni pulled on the reins. I'll send you here. You can do whatever you want to do next. Ning Shu bowed and saluted. Your Highness, thank you for your trouble along the way. Your Highness, please go back. Hold on. Ning Shu turned back. Under the almost transparent ink-blue night sky, Xiao Yuni's expression was as calm as water, only his bright eyes were shining with a hazy light. He laughed softly. You always say that you should remember a great favor in your heart, but it's not as practical as eating it. You should treat me to a meal one day to repay my favor. Ning Shu was speechless and immediately said, No problem, it's my honor to treat your highness to a meal. I'll remember it. Don't think about going back on your word. I'm very familiar with where Duke Ning's door is. After joking, he added, Be careful and try not to get hurt. If you get hurt, I won't be like Xiahou Qing and risk my life for you. Ning Shu also smiled, feeling relieved. She knew that the thing that had been stuck in their throats together had finally disappeared, turned into fluorescent powder and was blown away by the night's breeze. Bowing to him again, Ning Shu dismounted and turned to knock on the door of the Prime Minister's manor. The two of them parted ways. Lady Ning, my eldest young master is not home, please go back. As soon as the door opened and he saw Ning Shu's face, the gatekeeper rolled his eyes and slammed the door in her face. Chapter 395. Ning Shu's face was covered in dust again. Her forehead bulged as she spat twice. TSK. These days, why do families like to invite people to eat in the cold? What kind of fetish is this? Fortunately, she was never picky about food and could eat anything. Ning Shu knocked on the door again. Then where is your Prime Minister? The Prime Minister went to the palace to ask His Majesty for mercy, but he hasn't returned yet. Is Madame Tan here? He. Madame fell ill when she returned home in the afternoon. The imperial physician that was invited to treat her was also chased out by Madame. Right now, the residence is in a mess. Speaking of which, it's all thanks to you. Since she had asked this, it seemed like there was no hope. Ningxu sighed and could only return home. When she passed by Qintai Road, she suddenly heard the sound of flustered footsteps in front of her. It was a woman's anxious figure in the middle of the night. It was so late and it was a woman. Ningxu was afraid that something had happened to the other party, so she urged her horse to chase after her. When she recognized the other party's appearance, she was surprised. Miss Chengwei? That figure suddenly froze. Xue Chengwei turned her head and her eyes narrowed. That delicate face was covered in panic sweat, without a trace of blood. In such a dark night, her entire body was trembling, like a paper butterfly that could be torn apart by the wind at any time. Meeting Ningxu's puzzled gaze, Xue Chengwei immediately looked away helplessly. Ningxu didn't say anything. But what happened? Where are you going? Perhaps I can give you a ride. She clenched her fingers and smiled with difficulty. It's nothing, I just had a nightmare. I dreamed of the scene of my parents' death. I also thought of myself being alone and living under someone else's roof. My heart was filled with grief and I lost control of my emotions and ran out. However, I'm much better now. Thank you for your kindness. The Prime Minister's residence isn't far, so I can go back by myself. Ningxu reached out her hand. It's good that you've thought it through. However, it's not safe for a girl to be outside in the middle of the night. I'll send you back to the Prime Minister's residence. Xue Chengwei seemed to have been set on fire. She shook off her hand and took a few steps back. She said emotionally, I said no need. I can do it myself, I don't need your fake kindness. Didn't you hear? I really don't need you to send me off. You stole my second brother's heart. I really don't want to see you. I beg you, just let me go alone. Her expression was complicated, and her eyes were covered with a layer of sparkling water. Her hands tightly gripped the corner of her skirt, and she felt like she was going to cry at any moment. Ningxu frowned, and the doubts in her heart deepened. At this moment, a burst of fire suddenly appeared from a street not far away. The silent night was dyed red as flames soared into the sky. The quiet street suddenly became noisy. The sleeping commoners heard the cries of the fire and woke up from their sleep. They pulled their families to hide from the disaster and shouted loudly. They were exhausted from running for their lives. The braver men rushed into the backyard to grab wooden buckets and pots to help put out the fire. Bang! Bang! Clang! Clang! It was a mess. Xue Chengwei's entire body trembled as she subconsciously rushed towards the flames. However, she was caught by Ningxu. Xue Chengwei, what are you doing? The fire was so big that it would be dangerous to approach it rashly. You stay here and don't move. I'll go take a look. Such a big fire quickly attracted the Yongchengwei patrolling nearby. Even the bailiffs from the government came to put out the fire. In addition to the commoners who helped, over 100 buckets of water were poured down. Not long after, the fire was brought under control. After another half an hour, the last flame was completely extinguished. Everyone's face was covered in soot. They put down their buckets and let out a sigh of relief. The bailiffs still had to cover their mouths and noses as they rushed in to see if there were any casualties. After the fire was extinguished, the people who had retreated gradually gathered around and looked around. This is the home of the widow, Xiao Yu, right? Why did her house suddenly catch fire? No one ran out after so long, and I didn't hear anyone calling out. Could it be that she's dead? Who knows? She's such a playboy, fooling around with those dubious men all day long. She'll either get too excited and lose control of herself, or she'll drink herself to death and not even know that she's on fire. Just this month, there were quite a few mistresses and madams who came to her house to denounce her. Who knows which one of them took revenge on her? TSK, it's a pity that she has such a delicate figure. What's wrong? Do you feel bad for her? Be careful not to let that tigress of yours hear you and skin you alive. Ha ha ha. Ningxu dismounted from her horse and walked through the chatting crowd. Just as she was about to ask what was going on, she suddenly heard the bailiffs shouting, "Not good. Quickly go and inform Count Zhongyongzhu's family. Their young master is dead." Chapter 396. Upon hearing this name, the crowd immediately understood. It was because Zhu Guangzhou, the young master of Count Zhongyongzhu family, was a famous playboy in the capital. This person's interests were unusual. Most playboys liked to hang around brothels, pleasure boats, and red light alleys. They also liked to flirt with young ladies walking on the street. However, Zhu Guangzhou's interests were very niche. He liked to patronize beautiful widows who had lost their husbands, especially those who were in their early 30s. He didn't like those who were too young. Because of this, he had been beaten and scolded by his elders many times. However, the more he was beaten, the braver he became. They couldn't really beat him to death, so they could only turn a blind eye and let him be. Who would have thought that the famous flower Tai Sui in the marketplace would run into a ghost after walking around at night for a long time? That night, it would die. He could have died at any time, but he just had to die today. Ning Shu's heart skipped a beat. She pushed aside the crowd and officials blocking her way. "I am Duke Ning Shu, the imperial envoy appointed by the emperor to solve the case. Let me in." The officials were like headless flies. When they heard her introduce herself, they immediately let her in. After stepping over the blackened door and collapsed beams, she came to Yu Niang's bed. Ning Shu finally knew why the officials were so shocked just now. Not only was Zhu Guangzhou dead, but his half-burnt corpse had 7 to 8 holes. His lower body was incomplete, his eyeballs were dug out, and his face was cut beyond recognition. The way he died was exactly the same as the envoy. Yu Niang was lying on the side calmly, as if she had fallen asleep. When she saw Zhu Guangzhou's death, Ning Shu immediately said, "If he is the murderer, it shouldn't be like this." "Lady Ning, what do you mean it shouldn't be like this? Who is the murderer?" Yes. Another one is dead. How are we going to end this case? It can't be that the female ghost, Shui Hongi, did it, right?" Ning Shu made a prompt decision. "Don't panic. You guys immediately send people to go door to door and ask if there are any suspicious people around tonight. The rest of you, evacuate the crowd. You must not let anyone know about Zhu Guangzhou's death except for us here. Furthermore, they must not spread the news. Remember, if anyone dares to leak this information, it will be a serious crime that will affect the fate of the country. Everyone, please consider this carefully." Ning Shu ordered people to heavily surround the small house and forbid anyone from approaching. She walked out of the house and raised her head to meet Shui Qiongwei's teary eyes, which were hidden behind the crowd. She walked over, grabbed Shui Qiongwei, and brought her to a secluded place. Her eyes were like torches. "Miss Qiongwei, where is eldest young master now?" Shui Qiongwei shook her head in a daze, her tears falling like rain. "You're here alone tonight. Isn't it because you know what's going to happen here?" "Shui Qiongwei, stop lying to yourself. You won't be able to hide it." Shui Qiongwei's lips trembled a few times. She kept backing away and refused to be interrogated. "I don't know. I don't know anything. Even if you clench your teeth, what should be exposed will eventually be exposed. Tan Siwei is currently detained in the palace and can't leave the palace to commit the crime. The suspicion will definitely be locked onto someone else. And this person that you're desperately trying to hide and protect, there's no one else other than eldest young master. Say it. Perhaps he'll still have a chance to live." Under Ning Shu's interrogation, Shui Qiongwei collapsed and squatted on the ground, covering her ears as she wailed. Ning Shu couldn't bear to look at her, but even if she couldn't bear it, she had to harden her heart. "Miss Qiongwei, people always have to pay the price for their actions. I know that this choice is too cruel for you, but the reality is even crueler. Eldest young master and second young master's life and death may be in your hands. You should quickly make a decision. Do you want to tell me the truth?" When the Supreme Court received the news, they immediately sent more people to help. Although they tried their best to block the news of Zhu Guangzhou's sudden death still spread to half of the city at lightning speed. It was destined to be a sleepless night in the imperial city. With so many people, they quickly finished investigating the entire street. Before dawn, Ning Shu received a piece of conclusive news. When the fire started, someone nearby saw a figure that completely matched Tan Xixian's. Ning Shu forcefully closed her eyes. Sure enough, it was him. Tan Xixian, why did you have to do this? Deputy Minister Zheng and the others requested. Now that the truth of the case has come to light, can we post a notice to search the entire city for eldest young Master Tan? The sky was turning white. This was the coldest time of the day. The cool morning dew slowly seeped into the skin through the texture of the clothes. It was so cold that it made people shiver, but it was also the time when they were most awake. The sound of a woman's lute playing could be heard from the small building where they had not slept all night. The sound was like the autumn dew, tearing people up. Go, 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 go. Thousands of miles apart, at the ends of the world. Facing the slightly pink-white light, Ning Shu took a deep breath amidst the long and sorrowful song. She shook her head and said, "There's no need. I've guessed a place where he might be. This case should be solved." Chapter 397. The surrounding candlelight burned holes in the pitch-black underground palace. Tan Xixian stood quietly in front of the memorial tablets of the Shui family's ancestors. He was dressed in a bamboo-green silk robe, like the morning breeze, outstanding and lonely. When he heard the sound of footsteps coming from the secret passage, he turned around. His signature peach blossom eyes curled up slightly as he revealed his signature smile. "You're here. As expected, as long as Miss Ning is here, there is no place for me to hide. However, I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Now that I've taken my revenge, my long-cherished wish has been fulfilled. Let's go." In the flickering candlelight, Ning Shu's figure was soft and firm. "Eldest young master, are you not going to say anything else?" Tan Xixian sneered. "What's there to say? Since you've found me, it means that you've got something on me. No matter how much I quibble, it'll just be a waste of energy. I'm a businessman. I know that I won't do business that I've lost money on. The only pity is that I only had time to kill Zhu Guangzhou and let the rest of the Zhu family escape this calamity. When we meet in the underworld in the future, I'll definitely take revenge for my Shui family. Eldest young master, are you really the murderer?" In the empty and quiet underground palace, Ning Shu's voice was like drops of clear spring water falling on a stone stream, echoing coldly. "Or is it that in this series of cases, you're the only murderer?" Tan Xixian's calm expression froze. Then he raised his eyebrows and joked, "Lady Ning, what do you mean? Could it be that you can't bear to see me in prison, so you're purposely helping me clear my name? Then I'll have to thank you for your kindness." Ning Shu wasn't angered by his deliberate words. Her thoughts were organized and clear as a string. Yesterday, when Tan Shaoqing was brought into the palace for interrogation by head steward Zhao, Madame Tan's words indeed made me very suspicious of you, eldest young master. At one point, I really locked the suspicion on you and mistakenly thought that Tan Shaoqing took the initiative to admit his guilt to protect you, eldest young master. Because in this case, there are too many people lying in order to protect the people they care about. One lie after another, like layers of fog, the truth in front of our eyes was changed beyond recognition. Even I was temporarily blinded by the mixture of truth and falsehood. Just before the fire broke out last night, I was still thinking that if you were the real culprit, the next target would be the Zhu family. However, on second thought, he immediately rejected the idea. Because if the real culprit is you, you don't have to be in a hurry to make a move. You can wait for the second young master to be convicted by His Majesty and let him take all the blame for you. Then you can use other methods to take revenge on the Zhu family and plan slowly. This way, what's done cannot be undone and no one will suspect you. Oh, it seems that Lady Ning trusts me a lot. Tan Xixian sighed faintly. Thousands of flickering candlelight dragged out countless chaotic shadows under his feet. It was a kind of calmness towards death. It's a pity that I was seen by a passerby last night. At that time, the fire had already started and many people had surrounded me. I didn't have time to kill him to silence him. That's why I was caught, so I panicked and hid here. It's really a stroke of luck. The heavens aren't helping me. Ning Shu softly said, "Is it really the heavens that aren't helping you, Or is it that you have painstakingly planned this? Tan Xixian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What plan? Lady Ning, the more you say, the more suspicious it is. This Tan is actually confused. Could it be that I am framing myself? Could it be that you aren't? With one sentence, the cynicism on Tan Xixian's face was completely broken. Ning Shu looked deeply at him, her eyes full of pity and helplessness. Eldest young master, to be honest, you are indeed smarter than the second young master. You deliberately used the same method of murder to create a new case and used this new case to perfectly cover up the old case, attracting everyone's attention to you. The world will naturally think that the other case was also done by you. However, this is not the case. You are too deliberate. You chose such a time and method to commit the crime, and deliberately made such a big commotion. You simply want to let the whole city know as soon as possible, let the emperor know, let the world know that this case was done by you. At the same time, it was this deliberate fire that made me fall into a state of contemplation. What kind of person could make you and the second young master risk your lives to protect him? Until I finally understood, there was no other person who could be this person. Only, following Ning Shu's analysis, the expression on Tan Xixian's face froze inch by inch. When he was about to blurt out the answer to the riddle, the beautiful and perfect smile on his face that was like spring snow shattered and splashed in all directions, leaving only a ghastly white. Ning Shu did not see his pain, but she had no choice today. She was determined to be the villain. She took a deep breath and said word by word, only the cousin Xue Qiongwei. She is the real descendant of the Xue family. Chapter 398. An icicle ruthlessly pierced into Tan Xixian's skull from the top of his head. A huge pain spread from his brain to his spine, all the way to his limbs and bones. His legs swayed, and he almost fell to the ground. Despair and pain were like two executioners clutching at his heart, causing him to gasp heavily. Don't talk nonsense. This case has nothing to do with Bongwei from beginning to end. She is the daughter of Dingzhou's Xue family, and has nothing to do with Xue Hongyi. I am the true heir of the Xue family. Otherwise, why would I be here? This should be a scam that Prime Minister Tan spent over 20 years to create. Over the course of the night, Heaven's Inquisition followed the flow of Prime Minister Tan's past. In addition, Forsythia had urgently scouted out information from Dingzhou. Finally, Ning Shu pieced together the rough outline of what had happened that year. 23 years ago, the Tan family and the Wang family were both scholarly families, and were well matched in social status. Thus, the elders of the two families worked together to set up a marriage contract between their only son, Tan Shiyuan, and their youngest daughter, Huang Saiwen. One was a peerless scholar who had been given high hopes by his elders, and the other was a well-known talented woman in the capital. Everyone thought that they were a match made in heaven, and that there was no better match in the world. Unexpectedly, Tan Shiyuan was proud and arrogant at the time, and hated being manipulated by others the most. After a huge commotion, he broke off relations with his family, and concealed his identity to make a living selling calligraphy and paintings in the marketplace. He was indeed very talented, and even after leaving his family, he quickly became famous in the marketplace. In particular, his painting of a beautiful woman attracted the attention of the courtesans in the Western market, and they were all proud to be in his paintings. Thus, he met the courtesan Xue Hongyi, whose name shook the capital at the time. A talented scholar from a famous family, and a former general's daughter who had been forced to fall into the world of mortals. The two of them had similar temperaments, and after many conflicts, they gradually developed feelings for each other and decided to marry. This should have been a beautiful beginning, but the Huang family found out. Tan Shiyuan would rather marry a courtesan than a girl from the Huang family. This was like a slap to the Huang family's face. For the proud Huang Saiwen, this was a great humiliation. Thus, on the eve of Tan Shiyuan and Xue Hongyi's wedding, a hoodlum suddenly appeared and bribed Xue Hongyi's maidservant, leading to a series of tragedies. In order to protect Xue Hongyi, Tan Shiyuan returned to the family and was willing to become a puppet that he had once disdained, marrying Huang Saiwen. However, how could Tan Shiyuan, whose heart was filled with boundless hatred, be willing to play along with Huang Saiwen and pretend that the past had never happened? Therefore, not long after the marriage, Tan Shiyuan brought a baby boy from outside and pretended to be his illegitimate son as the most ruthless revenge against Huang Saiwan. From then on, this husband and wife became the most harmonious and envied on the surface, but the most despicable resentful couple behind the scenes. After Shui Hongyi was rescued from the river by the golden cicada shedding its carapace, she was already deeply traumatized. When she found out that the love of her life had become her husband and her younger brother's whereabouts were unknown, her heart was even more traumatized. She hid in the thatched hut where her mother and younger brother used to live and mourned her death. A few years later, she became pregnant with Prime Minister Tan's child. This child should have given her a bit of luxury, but for some reason, she was taken away from her and sent to Tan Siwei's aunt and uncle who had been married for many years. She became their child, also surnamed Shui. After another 5 years, her aunt and uncle passed away in an accident, leaving no one to take care of the child. Finally, Prime Minister Tan took her in as his cousin, and she became his niece, as well as Tan Sixian and Tan Siwei's younger sister. As for Shui Hongyi, she was all alone. Finally, after 12 years of living dead, she completely left this filthy world. Tan Siwei had been kept in the dark until that night when he was asked by Ning Shu to look through the second volume of files related to Shui Hongyi. He discovered his father's name, and also discovered the shocking secret hidden in his family for 20 years. Eldest young master, you should have known the truth long ago. Therefore, after the envoy entered the capital, you immediately made connections with him and did everything you could to get close to him. This was to prevent Miss Bongwei from doing something stupid that couldn't be undone, and to prevent her from harming herself in her impulsiveness. However, you didn't expect that there were some things that you couldn't stop even if you tried your best. Ning Shu's voice was very soft, like a soft feather, for fear of hurting the person who was curled up and covered in cuts and bruises on the ground. She said, on the 7th day of the 5th month, the one who was truly humiliated wasn't Li Er, but Miss Bongwei, right? Chapter 399. The secret that he wanted to bury and bring into the underworld was revealed by Ning Shu. Tan Xixian's pupils constricted. The intense pain made it impossible for him to breathe. He could only clutch his chest tightly to prevent himself from suffocating. His eyes trembled rapidly and he said in a hoarse voice, "You've guessed it." Ning Shu lowered her eyes. The candlelight at the side cast a long shadow under her thick eyelashes. I've always been puzzled. Why did Li Er flee when Tan Shaoqing was humiliated by the envoys on the 7th day of the 5th lunar month? Even if Tan Shaoqing's martial arts were sparse, according to his temperament, even if he was beaten to death, he would not run away. Also, after the envoys succeeded and left, Li Er was taken away by the Tan family's carriage. Why was she still disheveled when she was found by the neighbors at Kangping Square the next morning? Also, on the 12th of the 5th lunar month, Li Er knelt in front of the two-faced Buddha for an entire night and silently recited the words "I regret." Was this regret just because she betrayed her good sister? Then why did she not regret it for such a long time? Why did she suddenly repent after being humiliated? There were so many questions that troubled me. I could not understand them no matter how hard I tried. It was only when I began to have doubts about Miss Bongwei that these questions were suddenly resolved. The Li Er in our hearts may not be that Li Er, but rather the eldest young master's sister, Shui Qiongwei. Ning Shu said softly, if my guess is correct, Li Er was almost humiliated that night. It was Miss Bongwei who passed by to stand up for her. You didn't expect that after saving Li Er, you would end up in hell, right? Tan Sixian took a deep breath and slowly turned his back. His eyes gazed blankly at the flickering candlelight in front of him. He smiled faintly and sorrowfully. When Bongwei was brought into the manor from Dingju, it was not long before I discovered her past. It was because she was too similar to father. Siwei and I were good with our right hands. Only she could use both at a young age like father. Moreover, she was interested in painting and calligraphy. Not only that, father's love for her could not be hidden. When she first entered the capital, she was not acclimatized and fell seriously ill. Father stayed outside her room for 3 days and 3 nights, unable to eat or sleep well. Siwei and I had never experienced that before. Moreover, as she grew older, Her features became more and more similar to those of the Tan family. This resemblance could be said to be that she resembled her aunt, but upon closer inspection, it could also be said that she resembled her father. There were 3 children in the family, but gradually, I realized that I was the only one who didn't look like a member of the Tan family. What a joke. I grew up being neglected by my mother. Although my father and mother never mentioned my past to me, the elders in the manor weren't blind and their mouths weren't mute. From those broken words, I spent a few years piecing together the love history of my father. After that, I suddenly realized that the crystallization of that love history wasn't me, but Bella. I was just a stray dog that was picked up from some wild place, a shield, a tool for revenge. However, I couldn't bring myself to hate Bella, because her nature was similar to mine. We were both pitiful creatures in this world. She was 7 years younger than me. Her eyes always timidly looked at everyone around her. They were stubborn and sad, as if tears would fall at any moment. One of her soft little hands pulled Siwei, while the other held me tightly. When she had nightmares at night, she would always curl up in her bed and cry all night, until dawn. However, she didn't dare to cry at all. Looking at her, I felt as if I was looking at my younger self. Thus, I instinctively walked over and hugged her small and soft body. In order to protect the secret of her identity from being exposed, I began to remind her to avoid using her left hand in the manor, especially in front of others. She also had to be more careful in front of Mother to not arouse her suspicions. I only hoped that Bella could grow up well and peacefully into a young lady. Then, she could completely break away from the manor and break away from the past. Tan Xixian closed her eyes and a tear fell from her eye. But later on, I realized how naive my thoughts were. Chapter 400. In the eyes of the world, Tan Xixian had a pair of peach blossom eyes that were frivolous. His smile was flirtatious, intelligent, and slick. It was as if he was born with a hard armor on his body. No one could hate him and no one could hurt him. Only at this moment, the armor was cracked and he was as weak as a lost child. It should have started when Qiong Wei was 14 years old. Last year, I found out that she began to go out frequently. Her whereabouts were hidden and she would often go out for an entire day. When I asked her, she would not answer me. She would always say that she went out to play with her friends and would only come back when it was dark. I asked around and found out that she was lying, so I sent someone to follow her. I found out that she had been looking for an old servant of the Shui family and investigating the past. I even found out that she was getting closer and closer to Susu. I realized her thoughts. She wanted revenge for the Shui family. But she was only 14 years old, a half-grown child. Compared to those towering trees, she was like an ant. But my persuasion did not work. When the envoy entered the capital, my heart thumped and I had a bad premonition. So I decided to take the initiative and get close to the envoy. While I tried to cover the envoy's eyes, I also tried to stop her actions. I thought that I had done it flawlessly, but I did not expect that I was still one step behind. In order to not let me find out her movements, she changed into men's clothes and quietly followed the envoy every day to find an opportunity. Until the night of the 7th of May, Li Yi was molested by the drunk envoy in the White Horse Lane. There was clearly only a small crack in the underground palace, but that light was so dazzling that his back bent, and he reached out to cover his face, tears continuously falling from the gaps between his fingers. Whether you believe it or not, Qiong Wei is actually a very soft girl. She did not want to see another girl suffer, so she stepped forward to entangle the envoy and the guards, giving Li Yi a chance to escape and report to the authorities. But she did not expect that Li Yi was afraid of the envoy's identity and did not ask for help from the authorities. Instead, she found a place to hide. Until I sensed that something was wrong and brought people to look for Qiong Wei. I met Li Yi who was hiding nearby and trembling in fear. But by the time I rushed over, it was already too late. Too late. My Bella had already suffered the greatest injury in this world. I was the one who knocked Li Yi out and dumped her in Kangping Square. I wanted her to have a taste of the pain that Bella suffered. Even if it was only a fraction of Bella's pain, or even 1/100th of it. Because that was what she deserved. That cowardly woman deserved it. Ning Shu didn't expect the inside story to be like this. She couldn't help showing a stunned expression. The scene of Xue Qiongwei baring her fangs and brandishing her claws flashed before her eyes. Xue Qiongwei's body was covered with thorns when Hui Mo accidentally touched her, as if the whole world couldn't be trusted. Ning Shu's heart suddenly swelled with pain. She couldn't wait to rush over and hug this girl. Tan Siwei wiped away his tears and paused for a moment. Then, he straightened his back and continued, "Originally, I was also prepared to make a move. But I wasn't prepared to do it on the night of the 12th of May. I knew that if the envoy died within the borders of Great Yu, it would greatly affect the relationship between the two countries. At that time, it wouldn't just be a personal grudge, but a national calamity. Thus, after making some plans, I decided that I would send him off 18 li after he left the capital. Furthermore, I would secretly feed him poison. It was a slow-acting poison. When he returned to southern Yang, the poison would take effect, causing him to bleed from his 7 orifices and die. But I didn't expect that Bella had her own plans. She actually collaborated with Bai Susu to steal the key to the Search Fang platform's secret passage and set up a trap. At the same time, she also used her own method to take revenge for Li Yi's betrayal. When I returned to the residence, I discovered that Bella hadn't returned at midnight. When I rushed back to the Search Fang platform, I discovered that everything was already done. Seeing Bella covered in blood and silently crying and laughing, my heart ached so much that it felt like it was being torn apart. Thus, I forcefully sent her out of the building and relocked the secret passage. I stayed in the secret passage until dawn, waiting for the officials to arrive. Then, I pretended that I had just arrived at the Search Fang platform during the chaos to assist you in your investigation. During this time, I erased all the clues that could prove that Bella was here. Chapter 401. Ning Shu looked at Tan Xixian, her eyes filled with sorrow and pity. No wonder I couldn't find a single clue after searching the crime scene. Young master, you've gone through a lot of trouble. Yesterday, it was raining heavily when head steward Zhao was escorting Tan Shaoqing into the palace under the emperor's orders. You deliberately brought Madame Tan to stop him, causing her to lose control of her emotions and say those words, which I happened to overhear. You purposely changed the tiger-headed shoes in the hut, right? You changed the baby girl's clothes and toys with the baby boys to confuse me and make me think that Xue Hongyi gave birth to a son. Also, Bai Susu's neighbor's family must have been bribed by you. As soon as they noticed my arrival, they loudly cursed and lured me to ask about it, which led me to expose you. Otherwise, there's no way to explain why I happened to overhear such an important clue when I was passing by. On the one hand, you had to save your brother who grew up with you before His Majesty convicted Tan Shaoqing. On the other hand, you couldn't let your younger sister, whom you loved dearly since childhood, be exposed. You were in a dilemma. In the end, you could only think of this plan. You sacrificed yourself and turned your life into wings to protect the two people you loved the most. Young master, why do you have to? Tan Xixian didn't mind at all. If I can protect Siwei and Bongwei, I'll gladly do it. But now, the fact that you killed Zhu Guangzhou is a foregone conclusion. Not only will you not be able to protect Miss Bongwei, you'll also be in prison. Tan Xixian's lips curled up. The candlelight in front of him shone on the corners of his eyes. He seemed to have turned into a candle flame, wishing that he could burn himself to ashes. Even if you already know the cause and effect of the matter, I've destroyed all the evidence. The witness is also on my side. Even if you stand in the throne room and expose Bongwei's identity, you don't have any evidence to prove that she killed the envoy. You can't convict Bongwei based on your conjecture, can you? Drip, drip, drip. Too many candlelight tears slowly dripped from the candlestick onto the cold ground. In the empty silence, in the midst of Tan Xixian's satisfied smile, Ning Shu slowly shook her head. There's a witness. Tan Xixian thought she was bluffing and didn't believe her at all. He sneered, impossible. Ning Shu stared at him and let out a silent sigh. That night, there was an old man selling incense who closed his store late. Around midnight, he saw a red shadow flash by the Chaobai River and left on a boat. At that time, His words were mixed in with the tens of thousands of onlookers, and no one paid attention to him. After the big fire yesterday, I suddenly remembered. I immediately sent someone to invite that old man. He said that the red shadow he saw was definitely a slender woman. It was definitely not a man. Right now, he was in the Supreme Court, and his handwriting was on the desk of the Supreme Court. Eldest young master, you shouldn't have the ability to shrink your body into a woman's appearance, right? Tan Siwei's face turned a frightening shade of green as if his back had been broken by a stick. He muttered in disbelief, how could this be? This shouldn't be. I've already arranged everything. How could this be? Heavens! Did the heavens really want Bella to die? Why would they be so cruel to her? Why would they be so cruel to us? Because he was too agitated, his words had already gone crazy. Halfway through his words, his throat suddenly surged as he bent over and spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood fell on his jade-like silk robe, sprinkling a patch of blood red. Ning Shu subconsciously took a step forward. Eldest young master. Tan Sixian fiercely retreated a few steps. After a few heart-wrenching coughs, he spat out the blood at the corner of his mouth. He suddenly sensed something and raised his head. That's not right. If you just want to catch me, you shouldn't waste so much time talking to me. What are you trying to do? Tan Sixian suddenly woke up. Where's Bella? Where is Bella? Did this silly girl discuss it with you? She ordered you to delay me here, and then Ning Shu silently moved her gaze away and didn't say anything. The only thing that could be seen was the accumulation of more and more candle tears, sprinkling countless tears on the ground. No, she promised me that she wouldn't tell anyone. Otherwise, my soul would scatter, and I would never be able to rest in peace. Since she was young, she listened to me the most. She definitely won't turn herself in. She won't. Tan Sixian was completely swallowed up by the chaos of despair. He pressed his head firmly, as if he was laughing and crying at the same time. He desperately shook his head and ran out, Bella, my Bella. Chapter 402. In the throne room, hundreds of officials lined up. His Majesty sat solemnly on the dragon throne, coldly staring at the girl who was kneeling on the golden bricks like an ant. The deputy envoy of Southern Yang stood on the side, glaring like a tiger watching its prey. He was quietly waiting for someone to die to extinguish the anger of Southern Yang. Tan Siwei's hands were tied and he was forced to kneel on the other side of the throne room. He desperately shook his head and begged Chungwei, don't admit it. Second brother is begging you, don't admit it. Second brother is begging you. His eyes were red. Listening to the voice that had protected her since she was a child, it was as if he had returned to when she was a child and cried for no reason. He helplessly coaxed her, little Chungwei, don't cry. Second brother is begging you, don't cry anymore. Otherwise, if your eyes are swollen, you won't be able to get married when you grow up. Ah, don't hit me. Second brother is talking nonsense and apologizing to you. Our Chungwei is so beautiful and cute. When you grow up, there will definitely be a line of young masters in the capital waiting to marry you. Okay, wipe your tears. Second brother will buy you the best sugar-coated whores. He really wanted to go back to when he was a child. At that time, it was really good. Xue Chungwei smiled slightly and didn't look at him. She raised her head and looked calmly at the emperor above the 9th step. She said each word seriously and firmly. It was as if her mother had turned and walked into 100 Flowers Tower more than 20 years ago when she was surrounded by tigers and wolves. On the night of the 12th of the 5th month, the envoy of Southern Yang died at Xuanfeng platform. I imitated my late mother's revenge. It has nothing to do with other people. My daughter, Xue Chungwei, pleads guilty. When she finished speaking, all the civil and military officials secretly sighed, but no one dared to make a sound. The whole room was silent. Hearing the word Xue, the emperor's eyes flashed with a myriad of emotions. A moment later, he lifted the corner of his mouth and said coldly, Xue family's daughter, Xue Chungwei, is extremely daring. She murdered the envoy of Southern Yang and almost caused a rift between the two countries. This is an unforgivable crime. Tomorrow at noon, she will be beheaded in public at the Shenwu Gate. Prime Minister Tan's forehead hit the ground, and hot blood flowed down half of his face. With tears in his eyes, he pleaded, "Your Majesty, I beg your Majesty to spare my daughter's life, considering that I have been cautious and conscientious for the past 20 years, and I have never dared to slack off. Your Majesty, I don't need you to plead for me," Xue Qiongwei screamed. Hearing about the death penalty, she wasn't afraid at all. Instead, she revealed a satisfied expression. "Before Bella died, I was able to kill such a person for my ancestors, for my mother, and for myself. This trip to the human world was not in vain. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your mercy." Prime Minister Tan's entire body began to tremble. He walked to Xue Qiongwei on his knees and reached out his trembling hand to Xue Qiongwei. Tears streamed down his face as he said, "Qiongwei, father has let you down. I have also let your mother down. But you have just turned 15, you cannot die. I can't watch you die." Xue Qiongwei showed an extremely disgusted expression and avoided his hand. "You're not my father, so don't mention that word in front of me. I am the daughter of the living dead. My mother died in the Chaobai River 23 years ago. My birth was the result of hatred. No one is my father. I don't need a father." Prime Minister Tan seemed to have aged 20 years in an instant. His lips didn't have a trace of blood as he said numbly, "Do you hate me? You've been hating me for so many years, right?" Xue Qiongwei's eyes also turned red. "If you hadn't forcefully taken me away from my mother back then, my mother might not have been so depressed and left this world in her 30s. If I had always been by her side, perhaps I wouldn't have so many regrets and hatred. My life wouldn't have turned into a pile of stinky cotton wool. You took away a woman's body, heart, and everything she had, but you watched as she was bullied and humiliated. You were powerless to protect her, and in the end, you even married the daughter of the family that had persecuted her. In the end, you even forced her into a dead end with your own hands. You are such a weak and useless man, why can't I hate you? Tan Shiyuan, even if the world thinks highly of you, even if the people admire you, I will never think highly of you in this life. Back then, I had no choice but to take you away from Hong Yi. Back then, when she jumped into the river to commit suicide, she was already determined to die. It was I who forcefully pulled her back from the gates of hell. She knew that what happened back then was the Wang family's scheme. She hated Saiwan to the bone, and hated me even more. Under such a strong hatred, she lost her mind and thought of ways to hurt herself every day. In those 6 years, I tried everything to stop her, to protect her, to love her. Gradually, I saw that she was getting better. I thought that this hurdle had finally passed, and we could return to the harmonious life of immortals. Then, you came. At that time, I was very happy. Everyone thought that my career would be smooth and that I would be able to rise to the top. But only I knew that my life was as full of holes as your mother's. It was sad and pitiful. Your arrival was like a beam of light that illuminated our struggling life. For this, I was willing to shorten my life by 10 years, or even 20 years. But what I didn't expect was that your arrival was like a key that opened up the darkness hidden in Hong Yi's heart. She relapsed, and this time, it was even more terrifying than before. As long as she saw something sharp, she could pick it up at any time and stab it into her own flesh, my heart, or even you, who had just been born. I really had no other choice. Qiongwei, the high and mighty prime minister of a country was now crying like a wretched child. You were Hong Yi's and my most precious treasure. I couldn't watch as such a small and soft person like you died in Hong Yi's and my hands. I could only send you to Dingju. Chapter 403. There's no other way. Yes, you always have so many difficulties. Xue Qiongwei's lips trembled in the face of his crying. She raised her hand to wipe away the tears that shouldn't have been there. She raised her head to look at the towering roof of the palace. There were circles of caissoons carved with multicolored lotus patterns. In the center of the caissoons was a coiled dragon spitting water. It was like an evil dragon that hid in the deepest part of people's hearts. She sneered 3 times and said softly, "Every one of you has your difficulties. That filthy envoy from southern Yang did it for the prosperity of his motherland." Huang Saiwan's love turned to hatred, and hatred turned to jealousy. She forcefully took everything that didn't belong to her. In the end, she guarded it for the rest of her life and suffered the consequences of her actions. You had no choice but to marry Wang Saiwen to protect my mother. However, in your heart, you couldn't bear to part with my mother, so you hid her in a thatched hut, never seeing the light of day, never seeing strangers. It sounds like you were deeply in love, but in reality, it was all because of your selfishness. You clearly knew that she hated this capital and everyone on this land, but you still locked her up like a bird in a cage for 12 years until she died. He had made her pregnant, but he had forced her to experience life and death again. He had forced her into a dead end. Since you didn't have the ability to give her happiness, why didn't you give her freedom? At the end of the day, all your so-called difficulties are just your selfish excuses. You used my mother to express your yearning for freedom, you used Big Brother to take revenge on Wang Saiwen, you used me to illuminate your life of being manipulated, but aren't you also manipulating us? What crime did Big Brother commit? He's clearly not of your blood, so why did he have to live under Wang Saiwen's suspicion and torture since he was young? He had the ambition to reach the clouds, but in the end, he became a businessman that he didn't like at all. He was a living person, not a tool for your revenge. Second brother had a pure heart since he was young, determined to travel the world and be a person who walked freely in the world. However, he was forced by you to enter the official career and become a copy of you. As for me, you only knew to bring me to the Prime Minister's manor and take care of me so that you could feel at ease and feel that you've fulfilled your responsibility as a father. But have you ever thought about it? Ever since I was a child, I've been walking on thin ice in the unfamiliar Prime Minister's manor with the identity of Miss Biao. I'm afraid that one day Wang Saiwen will expose my true identity. I know you're my biological father, but I can only call you uncle. Don't you think it's ridiculous? In essence, you are exactly the same as Wang Saiwen. People like you are so selfish that it makes people want to vomit. If I had a choice, I would rather die in the hands of my mother. Prime Minister Tan was too ashamed to show his face after having his hypocrisy peeled away from him. He could only kneel on the ground and cry, Bongwei. After she finished speaking, Xue Qiongwei didn't even want to look at him again. She shifted her gaze and looked at Tan Siwei, who was being held at the other side of the hall. She felt as if 10,000 needles had pierced her heart, causing her to be in so much pain that she couldn't stand up straight. Tears dripped down from her sharp and pale chin, wetting half of her body. Second brother, I'm sorry. I've been pretending to be you all this time. The list of names that was wrong on the night of the 12th of May was actually my doing. I know that you like to do things by yourself, so if something you're responsible for is wrong, you'll definitely find a way to make up for it. Therefore, I purposely changed that list of names to lure you away and make you lose your alibi. I'm too vicious. I've always wanted to take revenge on Wang Saiwen, but I couldn't find a suitable way. Therefore, this time, when the evil dragon in my heart crawled out, I had this evil thought. I wanted to frame you. You clearly knew the truth, but you still protected me with your life. I didn't have the courage to tell you the truth for a long time, and in the end, I even harmed Big Brother. I'm not worthy of the good you've all treated me well since I was young. I've let you down, I've let you down. I'm sorry. Xue Qiongwei bent down and hit her forehead heavily on the ground. Chapter 404. Tan Siwei shook his head desperately. Don't be like this, Qiongwei. Get up. You didn't do anything wrong to me. It was my mother who harmed you and your mother. You've been trapped in so much pain for so many years, but I didn't realize it and couldn't help you. I've let you down. On the dragon throne, the emperor frowned in disgust and said coldly, all right, the case is closed. I don't have the time to watch you play out your grudges and make me sick. Zhao Bin, take the criminal to the prison immediately. The execution will be tomorrow at noon. Tan Siwei's body was as stiff as a dead tree. He watched as the guards entered and carried Xue Qiongwei out of the palace. He shouted like a madman, Qiongwei. Xue Qiongwei turned around to look at him one last time. A teardrop slowly slid down from the corner of her eye, like a sparkling pearl rolling down her transparent cheeks. Her voice was choked with sobs and trembling, but the corners of her mouth pulled up into a dewy smile. She said, "Second brother, if there's a next life, we'll meet again, but I won't be your brother anymore, okay?" His reddened eyes reflected her slender and fragile figure. This little face that was clearly crying and terrified, but still stubbornly pretended to be fearless. It was exactly the same as the little girl he had met 10 years ago. Tan Siwei's lips trembled and his throat was choked with sobs. He stared deeply at his little sister and nodded slowly. "Okay. Qiongwei, I promise you, okay. Xue Qiongwei smiled sweetly. It was simple and pure, without any regrets. "That's good. It's a promise. If I go back on my words, I'll look for you in my next life. I'll go to the ends of the earth to find you. Don't send me off tomorrow. It won't look good. I can't let you see it." She finished her last sentence. "Goodbye, second brother." She turned around and resolutely stepped out of the high threshold of the throne room. At the bottom of the 81 jade steps, Tan Xixian and Ning Shu stood and looked up. The moment she saw Tan Xixian, more tears fell from Xue Qiongwei's cheeks. Those tears were called guilt. Endless guilt, so much so that the world couldn't contain it. She opened her mouth and wanted to say something, but her chest was blocked by tears and she couldn't say a word. Tan Xixian shook his head and walked up to her step by step. He stretched out his warm big hand and wiped the tears on her face. "You little girl, you've always listened to me since you were young. Only this time, you were so bold and acted on your own. You've really grown up and your wings have hardened. You know how to set a trap for me and take the initiative to confess against me." He smiled again. "But that's true. You've already grown up. When you came of age this spring, I was the one who helped you with your hairpin. In the blink of an eye, you've already learned to bear the consequences of your own actions. Big brother didn't dote on you for nothing. You've grown up into a good girl. Bella, don't say anything else. Big brother will accompany you on your last journey. When you were young, you always asked me what the red spider lily beside the yellow springs looked like. Was it really as beautiful as it was painted in the stories? This time, let's go and take a look together." After he finished speaking, he stretched out his big and reliable hand to her. It was just like how he had done countless times when she hid by the pond or behind the fake mountain when she was young. Xue Qiongwei looked at him with teary eyes. Just like how she had done countless times when she was young, she slowly and confidently placed her small hand in his. Then, one big and one small, under Ning Shu's wavering eyes, walked forward side by side. Today was a clear day. The clouds in the sky above the ninefold palace were scattered and the wind blew for 90,000 miles. A free and unfettered bird flapped its wings and took off from a deep corner of the palace in the northwest corner of the palace. That place seemed to be a cold palace. In the palace, there was a mellow and carefree voice singing in solitude. Doing things again and again, parting with the ruler in life. Separated by more than 10,000 miles, at the ends of the world. This song flew into the clouds along with the bird's wings. It sounded like a sigh. Chapter 405. The case was solved, and the officials took their leave. Ning Shu stood in the chaotic crowd, watching Xue Qiongwei and Tan Xixian being escorted out of the palace by the imperial guards. When she brushed past them just now, Xue Qiongwei whispered in her ear, "At first, I hated you. Second brother's eyes only knew how to stick to you. I really hated you to death in my heart. But now, we're even. Thank you. If it wasn't for your advice, I would have watched Big Brother take the blame for me, and I would have dragged out an ignoble existence. Then I would have fallen into a demon's trap, repeating my mother's mistakes. Now, my life can be considered complete. With Big Brother accompanying me, I'm not afraid. There's only one thing. My second brother's heart is tied to you. I can see that your heart isn't with him. But after we leave, second brother will definitely be depressed. Can you not push him away for the time being? Wait until he calms down, then slowly let him give up. That way, he'll feel better. I beg you, okay?" The young girl's watery eyes were filled with pleading. She was like a gardenia that had spent an entire night to condense a few drops of dew and carefully held them in the center of the flower. She was anxious, and she was burning with hope. This was her last attachment and reluctance in this world. Ning Shu's heart couldn't help but twist. She only felt a wave of sour blood surge in her chest. She could empathize with the feeling of loving someone so deeply. She knew that it was reasonable. Even if it was to make Xue Qiongwei feel at ease, she should still nod. But using a lie to whitewash the peace could be even more harmful to Tan Siwei. Moreover, she had Xiahou Qing. He was waiting for her. Ning Shu took a step back and bowed deeply. I can promise you that I will do my best to comfort him, help him, and support him. But that's from the perspective of a friend. As for other things, I can't do anything. Please forgive me. Xue Qiongwei pouted. Ari, I knew you wouldn't. You're still as hateful as before. I'm about to die, can't you even lie to me? Really? After complaining, she waved her hand and said, but forget it. Second brother has a sincere friend like you. It's better than a deceitful woman. Ning Shu, I'll leave my second brother to you. I'll repay your kindness in my next life. Let's part ways here. Take care of yourselves. Take care of yourselves. For the last time, the two of them looked at each other tacitly and smiled. This case that had alarmed both countries and affected millions of people in the capital had finally come to an end. The Prime Minister Manor had lost a life to the southern Yang Kingdom, and lost a life to the loyal and courageous Zhu family. Prime Minister Tan, because he had shielded Xue Hongyi 23 years ago and had not been strict with his son, had stepped down from his position as Prime Minister and asked to be removed from his post. At noon the next day, Tan Siwei brought his brother and sister home with tears in his eyes and buried them in the Xue family's ancestral grave. Prime Minister Tan stood in front of Xue Hongyi's memorial tablet for a long time. Then, he turned around and walked into the peaceful place of Buddhism. As for Ning Shu, after the case was solved, she did not go anywhere. She returned to the manor and slept until the bright moon dimmed, the sky was pale green, and the sunlight was bright. She opened her eyes and casually stuffed a few pastries into her mouth. After bidding farewell to her parents, she stepped on the stirrups and left the capital like a gust of wind. After a day and a night, she returned, covered in dust. She didn't even have time to drink a mouthful of water before she hurried to the crowded Zhong's pastry shop in the Eastern Market to line up. After waiting in line for 4 hours, she reached the end of the long line. Ning Shu carried the steaming hot lily pastries and mounted the horse again. The horse's hooves hit Shishire Street, which was only 1 street away from the Prince of Nanping's manor. After more than 40 hours of traveling day and night, Ning Shu's eyes flashed with illusions. Her hands fell from the horse's back and her body leaned to one side, falling off. A passing figure flew over in time and hugged her. Chapter 406. Shu-er, Shu-er. A voice called softly by her ear. Ning Shu woke up from her daze and met Xiao Yuni's worried eyes. Are you all right? I'll take you to the clinic now. Ning Shu shook her head and jumped out of his arms, her voice hoarse from running for a long time. I was distracted just now and didn't control the horse. I'm awake now. Thank you for saving me, Your Highness. Otherwise, I'm afraid my head would have been broken and bleeding. She clutched her chest, her heart still palpitating as she broke out in cold sweat. If she had really fallen just now, the injury would have been small, but the disfigurement would have been a big deal. You have to take good care of my pretty face. It's good that you're all right. Xiao Yuni saw her subconsciously covering her face and smiled, holding her waist to help her steady herself. The waist under his hand was so thin and soft that when he held it, it was like there was endless magic that made him reluctant to let go. Xiao Yuni's eyes darkened, a warm feeling in his heart surging. He tried his best to suppress the surging heat and joked casually, Shu-er, I still remember that you still owe me a meal. Today, I saved you again. Now that the case is solved, shouldn't you honor that meal? Ning Shu hit her head, remembering that night when Xiao Yuni helped her and escorted her. She did promise him this. She said with a red face, Your Highness, don't worry. It's just a meal, I won't go back on my words. But I still have something important to do now. When it's done, I'll personally go to Your Highness's residence to send an invitation card and invite you sincerely. Xiao Yuni raised an eyebrow. There's no need for an invitation. I think it's better to do it now than today. As for the important thing you said, is there anything more important than repaying me for saving your life? I remember that you especially like Little Uncle's Chasing Clouds and Moon Chasing restaurant. I specially asked Little Uncle to leave a private room for me these few days. It's time for dinner now, so why don't we go and come back early? If it was the previous Xiao Yuni, Ning Shu still had ways to deal with him. But he had changed his temperament and was like a ball of cotton, not having any reaction when she punched him. And this ball of cotton was surprisingly soft, welcoming her with a warm face, making her too embarrassed to even punch him. Ning Shu immediately possessed by official Feng, saying bitterly in her heart, Aya, what should I do? Just as she was in a dilemma, she heard two familiar suppressed coughs behind her. Her heart swayed uncontrollably, and her eyes trembled slightly. She immediately turned around and looked at the end of the road. Behind the hurried figures, there was a tall and straight figure that resembled an immortal. The tip of Ning Shu's nose tingled, but her face and heart were filled with endless joy. Xiahou Qing. It really was him, Xiahou Qing. They had not seen each other for only 32 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. After that serious injury, his jade-like face was even paler than before, so pale that it was almost transparent. It made him look fragile and made people want to protect him. But the aura he exuded was like a snow-white mountain that had been standing for thousands of years. No matter how the wind cut it, he would shine and never collapse. With the help of Hui Mo, Xiahou Qing slowly took a few steps forward and said calmly, Your Highness, since she doesn't want to go now, you don't have to force her. Xiao Yuni's eyes moved slightly and he smiled. It said that the Xiahou family's young master had met with a mishap and his life was uncertain. It's really worrying. I didn't expect the young master to be blessed by God and survive this disaster safely. It's really worth celebrating. Thank you for your concern, Your Highness. I'm still not feeling well, so I won't accompany you any longer. Xiahou Qing said politely and then coughed a few times. He waved at Ning Shu and said, Come to me. With just a few simple words, he called her over and she walked towards him. As the waist in his hand left, a deep and complicated expression appeared on Xiao Yuni's face. He rubbed his empty fingers and slowly put them behind his back. Ning Shu carefully walked towards Xiahou Qing step by step. When she was in front of him, she took out the tightly wrapped oiled paper package from her chest. She carefully opened it and took a piece from inside and sent it to Xiahou Qing's mouth. I said that I would bring you shortbread. This is my favorite lily-flavored shortbread. Here, it's for you. Under her expectant gaze, Xiahou Qing opened his mouth and took a small bite. How is it? Is it delicious? Ning Shu looked up at his face, her eyes filled with him and the sun. Although he couldn't taste anything, Xiahou Qing still gave her face and tasted it carefully. When he finished the shortbread in her hand, he said softly, It's very delicious. Try it if you don't believe me. Ning Shu smiled and lowered her head, preparing to take a piece for herself. A slender and slightly cold hand reached out and accurately pinched her chin. Before she could react to what was going on, the devastatingly beautiful face in front of her had already closed in on her and enlarged. A pair of slightly sweet lips that had just eaten the desserts had already gently pressed against her lips like the wings of a butterfly. Chapter 407. The last time their lips touched was when he was in danger in the underground palace. In a moment of desperation, she used her lips to transfer air and pulled him back from the gates of hell. At that time, she was so anxious that all her actions were based on instinct. She didn't care about the etiquette between men and women, and he was in a deep coma, so she didn't have any ambiguous feelings. But this time was different. The afternoon sun fell on their bodies like a fishing net. Around them was Shishirei Street, one of the busiest streets in the capital. Every day, thousands of pedestrians and carriages would pass by here. In the background of this bustling scene, Xiahou Qing lowered her head and bent down. Half of her black hair fell to her chest. Two slightly cold thin lips covered her softness in a way that caught her off guard. Sobriety and confusion, gentleness and domineering. These contradictory emotions were miraculously merged together. Like fireworks in the night sky of the New Year's Eve, they bloomed in Ning Shu's mind. The numbness rushed all the way up her spine, making her dazed for a moment. The whole world seemed to have turned into nothingness at this moment. Only the thick black eyelashes that were close to her and their lingering breath were left. It was not until a long, long time after he kissed her that she came back to herself. She realized that her lungs were about to explode. Because of the sudden attack just now, she had forgotten to breathe. Feeling her shyness and panic, he curled his lips and gently scratched her chin with his finger. He asked, "Is it sweet?" Ning Shu was half intoxicated. Her whole body was as light as a feather, as if she was flying in the clouds. Her cheeks were stained with smoke, and her eyes were dazzled. She evaded his gaze and said, It's okay. This dessert shop is an old brand in the capital. The flavor is naturally excellent." Xiahou Qing let out a chuckle. His voice was low and soft. "I also think it's sweet. It's very sweet. I can't stop." When he smiled, the other half of Ning Shu's heart fell into the 50-year-old wine. She couldn't help but cover her face. Why didn't she know that this immortal cultivator, who looked as cold as ice and serious as a man who didn't get close to women, could make people's legs go soft when he spoke flirtatious words? It was no wonder that King Yu of Ju was willing to do such a ridiculous thing as playing tricks on the dukes. If she was the emperor and he was the favored concubine, it was hard to say who was more foolish between her and King Yu of Ju. Knowing that it was rare for her to be so shy, Xiahou Qing temporarily let her go and said to Hui Mo, "Let's go, Hui Mo, lead the horse." "If I lead the horse, then you," Hui Mo stupidly said half of the sentence, and then he realized what he was doing. He hurriedly put Xiahou Qing's hand into Ning Shu's hand. "I'll lead the horse, I'll lead the horse. I'm good at leading the horse. I can't free my hands, so I'll have to trouble Lady Ning to help me, he. She reached out to support Xiahou Qing. Ning Shu's face was still red. She noticed that there were countless pairs of eyes around them, and countless girls were biting their handkerchiefs with tears in their eyes. She shrank her neck and quickly lowered her head to help Xiahou Qing into the carriage. Juicy bowed in front of the carriage to welcome them. Xiahou Qing's voice brushed by Ning Shu's ear. "Juicy, do one thing for me. Later, go to the East Market and buy a shop called Zhong's Pastry Shop. Also, invite the owner to the prince's mansion to be the chef. I want the taste of this lily pastry to be exclusive to me from now on." Ning Shu's face, which had just dropped, suddenly soared again. Fortunately, the curtain of the carriage was closed in time, blocking countless fanciful eyes. The curious passers-by looked for a long time and whispered, "Just now, that was Xiahou Qing, the heir of Prince Nanping, right? Seems like it, seems like it. That posture, that demeanor, and the same disease in his eyes, who else could it be but him? Then who is the girl close to him? Duke Ning, Ning Shu. The last time she got married, she was slapped out by Madame Yun. I watched at the door and watched her carry the dowry back to the prince's mansion. There's no one else with such a foxy appearance. Didn't she just get engaged to the second son of the Tan family? The Tan family has just fallen. How did she get entangled with Xiahou Shizi? She won't take Xiahou Shizi as her future fifth husband, right? TSK, TSK, TSK. Look at this energy, this physical strength. She really deserves to be called the #1 jinx of our great Yu. Being Ning Shu's husband is simply the same as courting death. Look at the previous 3, none of them had a good ending. The news of the 4th Tan Shaoqing's engagement spread less than 2 days ago, and the entire Tan family was implicated in the case of the sudden death of an envoy. They lost their official positions, lost their reputations, and lost their lives. Scary, too scary. Her power is even fiercer than gunpowder. Wherever she goes, not even a blade of grass grows. Xiahou Shizi actually dared to provoke this black widow, the poisonous rose. He's too bold. Perhaps, this is true love. Chapter 408. Young Master Xiahou is so courageous. I'm really in awe. Let's see which one of them will subdue the other. The crowd was so excited by the gossip that they wanted to immediately knock on the bamboo board and call everyone in the city to share the news. After a while, thunder rumbled in the sky and it started to rain. The crowd quickly retracted their mocking and curious gazes. Ayo, ayo, why is it suddenly raining again? There's too much rain this year. Let's run. The crowd scattered to hide from the rain, leaving only Xiao Yuni at the end of the road. He stood alone in the rain, the fine drizzle wetting his hair. It was the same color as his pupils, making it seem darker. He stood there quietly, like a cold statue, not making any sound. An oil paper umbrella covered his head. Your Highness. The person holding the umbrella was a girl in her flowering period. Her eyes were watery and her eyebrows were playful. Looking closely, she looked very similar to Ning Shu. Even her style of dressing and makeup was the same as Ning Shu's. She was beautiful but did not lose her heroic spirit. The only difference was that under her gentle appearance, there was a sharp murderous aura. If Ning Shu saw her here, she would definitely have mixed feelings. Looking at her, Xiao Yuni frowned and said coldly, Fail One, why are you here? Didn't I order you not to show yourself unless I announce it? What's wrong? You don't care about my orders anymore, do you? Fail One immediately knelt down on one knee and bowed in fear. Fail One doesn't dare. Fail One only saw that it was raining and couldn't bear to see your Highness get drenched, so I boldly showed myself to shield you. It's Fail One who deserves to die for violating the taboo. Your Highness, please punish me. Even if I got drenched, what does it have to do with you? I remember telling you to remember your status and not overstep your boundaries. I took you in because I didn't want to disappoint Mother, but it doesn't mean that I won't kill you. Do you remember? The young girl's eyes were filled with longing and regret. Your Highness is Fail One's master. As long as your Highness wants Fail One's life, Fail One will not hesitate. Fail One knows that in your Highness' eyes, I am only Lady Ning's shadow. But even so, your Highness, please take care of yourself for the sake of this shadow. On your Highness' birthday night, you drank so much that you vomited blood. Fail One doesn't want to see your Highness hurt like that again. Xiao Yuni grabbed her neck. That's enough. I don't need you to remind me. The umbrella in his hand fell to the ground with a thud. Oh. Fail One was forced to raise her head, and her slender neck made a creaking sound. Her snow-white skin was red because she couldn't breathe, and her trembling eyelashes were covered with rainwater. Xiao Yuni stared at the tear falling from the corner of her eye. He seemed to have seen a certain life from thousands of years ago, when he had strangled Ning Shu, kneeling in front of him and crying silently. This illusion of unknown origin caused his heart to sway and his chest to feel stifled and painful. He couldn't help but loosen his grip. Fail One covered her neck that was almost broken and coughed violently. Xiao Yuni shook his head hard, but he still couldn't understand where that illusion came from. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes and turned around hoarsely. The hem of his brocade robe embroidered with golden clouds fluttered in the rain. If you're not dead, let's go. Fail One stared at his cold back and answered with a hoarse voice. She picked up the umbrella that had fallen on the ground and turned back to look at the Duke of Nanping's residence behind her. She then looked away and followed him. For tens of thousands of years, there were no clear skies or flowers in the underworld. It was monotonous and dull, like a dead ash. The only blooming red spider lily was actually not a living thing. It was formed from souls that had angered the heavenly Tao and were crushed into powder by the hand of the heavenly Tao. They had flowers but no leaves. The scarlet and beautiful color was all formed from the last mouthful of heart blood of those souls. After that, they had to wait by the river of forgetfulness for thousands of years, suffering the loneliest and most hopeless punishment in the world. When the scarlet color faded, the souls would completely disappear and they would finally be free. Therefore, it tasted terrible. Ning Shu had just entered the underworld for 10 years. After eating the 999th red spider lily and gloriously saying that she wanted them to die early and reincarnate, her face was numb. Chapter 409. Ning Shu sighed and sat on a large rock beside the river of forgetfulness. She muttered to Dendrobius, I don't want to say this, but the scenery in the underworld is really bad. Other than a few dark palaces, there are only red spider lilies. It's too boring. Dendrobius squatted beside her and poked her. This is also your underworld. He died around the same time as Ning Shu. Because of his merit, he was appointed by King Yang Luo to stay in the underworld. When his internship was over, he would officially become an official ghost servant. Because they were fated to go to hell together, and he had a good temper, he often accompanied Ning Shu to stroll around the underworld. Ning Shu. Okay, I forgot that I died a long time ago. So other than black and red, are there any other colors here? Dendrobius said, yes, look at that white bone ghost over there. His body is pale, just like my claw. But his body is richer. The yellow moving things on his body look like corpse worms. They're so cute. Ning Shu had her reservations about his unusual beauty. Other than black, red, pale and this cute yellow color, are there any other places in the underworld that are more pleasing to the eye? It's best if there's something lively. Looking at these boring things all day long, I feel like my soul is going to scatter. Let me think about it. Ah, I remember, there is. It's in the small garden behind King Chujiang's palace. It's the only living thing in the underworld, and it's also the only immortal herb. I heard that King Chujiang brought it into the underworld when he was still a deity. It has its own immortal aura and can even glow. It's very beautiful. The scenery in the garden was also created by King Chujiang according to the heavenly palace. It's beautiful and there's no other place in the underworld that's more beautiful and elegant than that. However, you better not go. I heard that King Chujiang has a bad temper. He doesn't even smile in front of King Yang Luo. No one in the underworld dares to provoke him. Hey, where are you going? Come back quickly. It'll be terrible if he catches you. If you really get caught by him, please don't say that I instigated it. Great Aunt, I beg you. Dendrobium's shouts were still echoing behind her. Grand Aunt Ning Shu had already drifted to the surroundings of King Chujiang's palace. She avoided the patrolling ghost envoys, then turned into a small grey stone and rolled herself into the heavenly palace of the underworld that was rumored to have immortal herbs growing there. It had to be said that His Highness King Chujiang, who was said to be the #1 beauty in the netherworld, had a sense of beauty that could crush all ghosts. There were pavilions and towers in the garden, and clear spring water flowed down from them. Rootless lotuses in the lotus pond swayed along with the ripples of the water, and there seemed to be the faint sound of music by their ears. It was clearly a ghostly realm where the sun could not be seen, but it made people feel as if they were in a fairyland. There were a few snow-white furballs bouncing around in the grass beside the lotus pond. Ning Shu reached out her hand to touch them, and she felt an illusion. She continued to walk towards the depths of the garden. Suddenly, she saw a rainbow-colored brilliance shooting out from a pot of flowers and plants. When she saw it, Ning Shu was captivated. She thought that this should be the pot of immortal herb that was famous in the ghostly realm. The spiritual energy that assailed her nose, as well as the aura of life, made any ghost that had stayed in the underworld for a long time feel an unbearable itch. I want it. She was endlessly greedy. She reached out her hand to touch it, but she did not notice that there was a downy bird that was resting on top of the immortal herb. That downy bird that woke up extended its beak and pecked her. Where did this bird's temper come from? It looks quite cute. King Chujiang's place really lives up to its reputation. I didn't expect that other than the immortal herb, he also raised an immortal bird. He really knows how to enjoy life. Rotten. The bird stared at her, and she stared at the bird. What are you looking at? I'm praising you for being cute. I haven't settled the score with you for pecking me just now. Why don't you come with me? Ha ha ha, don't worry. I, Ning Shu, am the best at taking care of people. If you follow me, I'll definitely let you eat and drink well. Let's go. That bird did not expect her to be so daring. It was caught by her for a moment. Carefully holding it in the palm of her hand, Ning Shu was extremely fond of it. She kept stroking its soft little head. Is it comfortable? Is it comfortable? So obedient. Little fellow, you look like this. Are you male or female? Let me examine you! ! The downy bird that was originally enjoying itself in Ning Shu's palm suddenly struggled with all its might. Ning Shu hurriedly said, "Are you shy? All right. I won't look. I'm just teasing you. I didn't expect you to really be a spiritual bird. You can understand everything I say. Moreover, I don't understand you birds. He. The downy bird cast a sidelong glance at her, but it seemed to be reluctant to part with her gentle touch. It was difficult not to argue with her. Ning Shu stroked its soft and slippery feathers for a while. She was addicted to touching it. To be honest, you're lonely here alone. Your master is busy all day and has no time to accompany you. Why don't you recognize me as your new master? If you don't want to, hurry up and say something. You don't want to say anything? Then I'll take it that you agree. Ha ha ha, come, little darling, give your new master a kiss. Seeing Ning Shu's lips getting closer and closer, the downy bird's little body stiffened and immediately struggled with all its might. Ning Shu saw that it was funny. When its little head moved to the left, she chased to the left. When its little head moved to the right, she chased to the right. She forced it to the brink of collapse. Ning Shu only saw a burst of light in front of her eyes. The downy bird in her hand quickly expanded and then turned into a tall and majestic figure in a purple gold-black robe. He broke free from her hands and retreated. The figure's face was immersed in a black fog. Only a pair of eyes stared coldly at her from behind the black fog. Ning Shu, how dare you offend me? You deserve to die. Chapter 410. The consequence of offending King Chujiang and tarnishing his innocence was to be hung upside down at the entrance of Fengju for a month and banned from getting close to King Chujiang's hall for 100 years. Ning Shu had no face to face the hundreds and thousands of ghosts that surrounded her to admire her heroic appearance. Even though ghosts didn't feel pain, they still needed some face, didn't they? Luckily, her psychological quality was excellent, so she got used to it quickly. Headless Ghost carefully held his head and squeezed out from the crowd of ghosts to ask curiously, I heard you kissed the legendary #1 beauty of Yudu. Is that true? Is that true? How did you do it? How powerful? Ning Shu said lazily, So, it's nothing worth mentioning. Painted Skin Ghost grabbed a brush and dabbed it on Headless Ghost's bloody neck to touch up her makeup. Then did you see how that highness looked like? How did she look? I've stayed in the netherworld for almost 30 years and still haven't seen the true face of that highness. If I still can't see her, I won't have any interest in reincarnating. Ning Shu made things up. She looks all right. 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. However, every part of her body is more well-rounded than ordinary gods and ghosts. Long eyelashes like fans, skin like congealed jade and smooth to the touch. She seems cold yet not cold, but she has eyes full of emotions. She's magnificent and elegant. That's about it. All the ghosts drooled and swarmed over. What else? What else? Be more specific. Ning Shu's eyes that were like black mercury rolled around, and she laughed. Hehe, you want to know? How about this, Painted Skin Sister, I'll tell you. Please help me draw it. Those who want to buy, come and queue up. The price is fair. 3 underworld coins for 1 painting. When King Chujiang accompanied Emperor Fengdu to patrol the netherworld, they saw such a scene at the entrance of Fengju. A snake-tailed queue stretched out half the street, and people were all rushing to buy the freshly made painting of the #1 beauty of Yudu. The Emperor of Fengdu cast a spell to conjure a picture and immediately laughed. Although I don't dare to compliment her painting skills, if you look carefully, her facial features are indeed somewhat similar to yours. It's just that her feminine aura is slightly heavier. Could it be that she really saw your true appearance? King Chujiang, who was immersed in the black mist, didn't make a sound, but the murderous black mist around him visibly thickened. The great emperor admired the beauty for a while. He then pointed at the little fat bird on the beauty's shoulder and said, there is also a fluffy bird next to it. It is so chubby and cute. The black fog was so thick that it could freeze a ghost to death. On the other side of the room, Ning Shu didn't know that the second party had already arrived and was watching. She was still happily selling her paintings to earn money while continuing to fabricate nonsense to attract more customers. Actually, it was His Highness King Chujiang who took the initiative to throw himself at me. I was in the garden admiring the flowers and reminiscing about the past. Suddenly, A purple gold shadow appeared and lifted my chin. He said to me, "Such a beautiful woman, why are you wallowing in self-pity and silently shedding tears? Let me console you." The other ghosts were suspicious. "Are you bragging? King Chujiang is famous in the 3 realms for not getting close to women. How could he take the initiative to seduce you? Also, if he took the initiative to kiss you, why would he still hang you upside down here? After 1,000 years, even the coldest stone will have a time when it craves warmth. Moreover, look at this young lady's beauty. Could it be that this young lady's beauty is not worth his attention? As for hanging me upside down here, you are ignorant and inexperienced. Don't you know that beating is affection and scolding is love? If you love deeply, you will kick me. His Highness King Chujiang is using a different method. He hopes that I will remember him deep in my heart." A cold voice appeared behind her. "Is that so?" Ning Shu didn't even think about it. Of course. She raised her head and suddenly saw the ghosts fall silent. They all retreated 70 to 80 feet in unison. Ning Shu then realized something and turned her head stiffly. She saw that slender and familiar figure in a purple gold black robe that was silent and murderous. Chapter 4:11. Who would have thought that after being mistaken for a bird and almost kissed by mistake, the person who was so angry that he didn't allow her to step within 5 li of King Chujiang's palace for 100 years would actually take the initiative to steal her beauty on the street one day? Ning Shu woke up from her sleep, but there was still a smile on her lips. "Older sister, what's wrong?" Ji's clear and curious voice came from beside her ear. Ning Shu returned to her senses. Nothing, what's wrong? Since I came in to see you, you've been smiling, and your smile is very strange. Just like. Jia tilted his head and deliberated for a long time before finding the right words. "Just like you ate something especially delicious, and your face is also red." Older sister, are you sick? My face is also red like this when I catch a cold. Older sister, don't move, Jia will call a doctor for you right now. Jia strode with his short legs and was about to run away worriedly. Ning Shu hurriedly pulled his soft little body back, her cheeks slightly hot. She cleared her throat and stood up. "It's really nothing, I just dreamed of some interesting things from my childhood." Jia blinked his eyes. "What interesting things?" "It's about when you were 1 year old, father prepared a large pile of ornaments for you, and even specially placed his favorite inkstone in front of you. In the end, you poured urine all over it." "That's right, that time, the last person you caught was Prince Zhuang's family's little princess, because she was the most beautiful." Older sister, you're too bad. We've already made a pinky promise, you can't talk about going out. If you're like this, I don't want to give you snow bean paste anymore." Jia was teased until his stomach was panting with anger. Ning Shu blinked and acted pitiful. All right, it's older sister's fault, older sister will apologize to you." "I'm so hungry, can little Jia bear to see older sister starve to death?" Jia pouted and angrily looked at her for a long time, but in the end, he gave in. "All right, I'll give it to you. But remember, if you say this again, I'll definitely break off relations with you." All right, older sister will listen to Jia." After coaxing Jia away, Ning Shu bathed and changed her clothes. Her lustrous white toes gently paddled in the water as she stepped into the bathtub. Ever since she left the Nanping Palace, she hadn't had the time to wash off the dust on her body. She slept for more than 4 hours before she gathered some strength and looked out of the window. The crescent moon was like a string, casting down a clear light, just like his magnificence. Back then, she had spoken nonsense behind his back and ruined his reputation. She had thought that he would be furious and throw her into the seawater prison for 180 years as punishment. She was frightened out of her wits and racked her brains to think of a way to beg for forgiveness. She didn't expect that he would just look at her for a long time without saying a word and then leave. Since then, the matter of her and King Chujiang's avocania began to spread widely in the underworld. When the ghosts saw her, they all respected her, causing her to be confused. Ning Shu narcissistically thought, could it be that it was really as she had made up? Back then, he was shocked at first sight and fell in love with her at second sight. Forsythia brought over the freshly cooked snow soft bean paste. Ning Shu picked up a piece and took a bite. Her cheeks inexplicably turned red again, and her painted eyes became watery. His lips were slightly colder than normal people's, but they were soft to the touch, just like the snow-soft bin paste in front of her that was as white as snow, as soft as clouds, and sweeter than honey. She tasted it, and half of her body went limp. She couldn't stop dreaming. Wait, why did she think of that kiss again? Ning Shu finished the food in her hands in 2 or 3 bites. She ordered Forsythia to open the window and let the night breeze take away the unusual heat on her face. Chapter 4:12. Forsythia pushed open the door and came in. "Miss, dinner is ready. Do you want to eat it now or when?" Ning Shu's white fingertips casually pointed at the translucent screen. The translucent screen faintly outlined her beautiful figure. "You can put it there first. I'll use it after I take a shower." "Okay." Forsythia put the food on the small table. When she tidied up her dress, she accidentally knocked over a wooden box inside. She quickly bent down to pick it up, but when she saw the shape of the wooden box, her expression suddenly changed. "Miss, you rushed for a day and a night just to get this thing from Master Hui Ci's old residence." Looking at Forsythia's nervous expression, Ning Shu rubbed the tip of her nose guiltily. "You found out. Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything with it. It's just that Master's old residence has been unguarded for a long time. It's not safe to leave this thing there. I thought it would be better to keep it with me." Forsythia's expression was unprecedentedly serious. "Miss, do you think I'm only 5 years old like second young Master? This is a life substitution GU. When Master passed away, you said that this thing was too evil. If you take this GU, all the injuries, poison, and illness will be transferred to your body, exchanging a life for a life. It's against the laws of heaven. Master struggled before he died, but he still didn't use it. It's better to let it go back to silence and never appear in the world again. But now you deliberately took it out. What do you want to do?" Ning Shu smiled. "Are you afraid that I'll use it to exchange my life with Xiaoho Qing? Don't worry, I'm not that stupid. Xiaoho Qing's life is very tough. He can walk around the gates of hell and come back. He won't die so easily. Even if one day he really becomes terminally ill and can't be saved, I don't have to exchange my life with him personally. There are too many criminals in this prison who have committed unpardonable heinous crimes to count. I don't care which criminal is going to be executed the next day. I will buy his life and compensate his family well. I am sure he will agree. Why would I put myself in danger for no good reason? I'm not that stupid." "Really?" Forsythia looked at her suspiciously. "Good Forsythia, will I swear to you on the greatest pleasure of my life? If I'm lying, then I'll never be able to eat any delicacies in the future, nor earn a single copper coin." She raised her hand and swore, her eyes wide open with sincerity. Forsythia gradually dispelled her doubts and put down the wooden box. Ning Shu thought of something and asked, "By the way, Forsythia, how has Tan Shaoqing been these days?" Before she left the city, she had specifically asked Forsythia to keep an eye on Tan Shaoqing's condition. Forsythia frowned and sighed. "Sigh. He's not doing so well." Ning Shu frowned. 10 miles away, after the sudden death of the envoy, city returned to its usual bustle in less than 2 days. There were even many people who were itching to come here to pay their respects to the crime scene. It was as crowded as a marketplace and the limelight was unparalleled. In an inconspicuous brothel at the corner of Xuanfang Terrace, Tan Siwei sat silently in the corner with unkempt hair and a dirty face. He poured cup after cup of strong liquor down his throat like a piece of wood that could move silently. The drinkers around him pushed away the girls in their arms and looked at each other. They stood up and surrounded him with smiles. One of them with slanted eyes smiled and said, "Ioyo, let me see who this is. So it's the high and mighty second young master of the Prime Minister's residence, the youngest 4th-ranked official, young Master Tan of the Supreme Court. Why are you in such a good mood to come to a brothel and drink wine with us, a group of ordinary people? This commoner is really flattered, ha ha ha." Chapter 4:13. Another person hurriedly stopped him. "Hey, Brother Li, you're in the wrong here. Aren't you mocking young Master Tan on purpose?" Who in the 9 provinces doesn't know that Prime Minister Tan knowingly broke the law, harbored a criminal, had a wicked daughter with a criminal, and is also a cruel criminal? His moral integrity is extremely repulsive, and he himself is too embarrassed to resign and become a monk. How can he still be considered a prime minister now? I heard that His Majesty was in court today, and there was a large pile of memorials to impeach the Tan family. His Majesty flew into a rage. The Tan family is either dead or seriously ill. It's already very fortunate that they can still take out 3 to 5 copper coins to drink wine with prostitutes. You're still mocking young Master Tan, aren't you purposely rubbing salt on his wound? Come, Minister Tan, please don't bicker with this scoundrel. This commoner toasts you with this pot of wine to thank Prime Minister Tan and Minister Tan for the hard work you've done for the people. This person raised his wine cup to toast Tan Siwei, but unexpectedly, his hand shook, and the entire cup of wine spilled on Tan Siwei's head. He pretended to be frightened and said, this commoner's hand is extremely clumsy. How could I offend Minister Tan? Let this commoner quickly wipe it for you. This person picked up a piece of cloth and hurriedly wiped Tan Siwei for a while. In the end, the more he wiped, the dirtier it got. He suddenly realized, I was wondering why the more I wiped, the dirtier it got, and the more I wiped, the more smelly it got. Minister Tan, you won't punish this commoner because of this, right? The person next to him said, how could I? Minister Tan is a famous lord under the heavens. Hey, Minister Tan, don't you think so? From the beginning to the end, Tan Siwei was like a piece of wood that did not have any feelings. He sat there quietly, allowing the countless mockery and ridicule to surround him. He did not say a word, and even his eyes could not move. He was like a walking corpse. The more he was like this, the louder the ridicule around him became. Minister Tan, why are you just sitting there and not saying anything? You look like a homeless stray dog by the roadside. Li Niang, look at Minister Tan. Isn't he delicate and pitiful and lovable? Why don't you sisters take Tan Shaoqing as a gigolo? In any case, Tan Shaoqing isn't far from being removed from his position. Ha ha ha. People's deep-rooted bad habits were undoubtedly exposed at this moment. When one person gave the idea, the rest of the motley crew immediately responded. As they spoke, they laughed and pulled Tan Siwei up, straight into the arms of the girls. In the midst of the shoving, a hand reached over and pushed Tan Siwei heavily onto the floor. Tan Siwei lay on the dirty floor as if he was dead. He looked up at the dazzling glass lamp above his head and the crowd that surrounded him like ghosts, pointing at him and laughing like they wanted to eat him alive. His ears were filled with noise. After a long time, he painfully covered his ears, turned sideways, and curled himself into a ball. Transparent tears flowed out of the corners of his eyes. A drunken middle-aged man staggered over. TSK, TSK, TSK. You don't look like a court official at all. You're simply a disgrace to our great Yu dynasty. Since your father has left home and doesn't care about you anymore, let me reluctantly teach you a lesson. As the man spoke, he grinned, picked up the hem of his clothes, and reached in with an empty wine cup. Not long after, amidst the crazed screams and applause of the crowd, the man carried a cup full of urine and walked in front of Tan Siwei. Minister Tan, this commoner will treat you to this cup of wine. You must kindly accept it, ha ha ha. He picked up the cup and was about to pour it over Tan Siwei's head. Suddenly, a leg flew over and kicked him in the chest, causing him to fall to the ground in a sorry state. The cup of wine in his hand splashed right on his face, causing his face to overflow with fragrance. The man was burning with anger. He picked up a chair and climbed up from the ground. Son of a bitch. Which son of a bitch dares to touch your master Zhao? I'll let you leave here alive today. The man nimbly retracted his leg and rubbed it in pain. His lips curled into a bright smile. Don't you know who I am? I'm the legendary Lone Star, the reincarnation of the celestial fox. If you speak to me, bad luck will linger for a month. If you continue to stay in the same room with me, you will most likely die without a burial place. You are Ning Shu. Master Zhao, what advice do you have for me? Chapter 4:14. There was probably no story more terrifying than the two words Ning Shu in the capital. Once they heard her name, most of the people who had been aggressively surrounding her immediately quieted down. This was because her name had spread far and wide. When most of the children in the capital cried and refused to listen, as long as their parents said, "If you continue to cause trouble, I'll have Ning Shu take you away," most of the naughty children would immediately shrink their heads and obey. In addition, she had solved 3 cases in a row. Wherever she went, people would die. Everyone respected and feared her. As expected, the ruffian who called himself Uncle Zhao shrank his neck back. He looked around and saw the dozens of pairs of eyes looking at him. No matter how scared he was, he had to put on a fearless expression. He glared and said, "So what if you're Ning Shu? I don't care who you are. In Shi City, your Uncle Zhao is the law. If you know what's good for you, immediately kowtow to your father and admit your mistake. Then your father will spare your life." Ning Shu blinked her eyes and said with admiration, "Uncle Zhao is so powerful. You actually dare to call yourself the law in the capital. This little girl admires you. But I'm afraid I can't kowtow to you. I, Ning Shu, only worship 3 kinds of people. The first is the elders in my family. The second is the emperor. The third is to worship the dead in the grave. Could it be that Uncle Zhao wants to be the last kind? You little girl, you dare to curse me? I'll beat you to death." Uncle Zhao raised the chair in his hand and angrily threw it at Ning Shu. But before he could get close, a stone had already hit his knee, causing him to fiercely fall flat on his face. The surrounding people immediately burst out in laughter. He lost all his face and was so angry that he went crazy. He shouted loudly as he climbed up and pulled out a knife from his chest to stab at Ning Shu. Zigui appeared and kicked him to the ground. He then forcefully stepped on his back, causing him to cry out like a pig waiting to be slaughtered. Zigui exerted more force and said coldly, "A lowly scoundrel like you actually wants to harm my family's young miss. You don't know the difference between life and death." The severe pain made him sober up halfway. Master Zhao lay on the ground like a dead tortoise that couldn't turn over. Only then did he realize that he seemed to have kicked an iron plate that he shouldn't have kicked. He immediately begged for mercy in fear. "I just ate horse urine soup. That's why I didn't recognize Mount Tai and offended Miss Ning. Please be magnanimous and forgive me. Please, miss." If everyone can be forgiven after they make a mistake by hypocritically apologizing like you, then what's the use of the law? Master Zhao, don't you think so? Ning Shu bent down, raised her eyebrows and smiled. "If I'm not mistaken, you wanted to invite Tan Shaoqing for a drink, right? Although my daughter's talent and learning are shallow, she has seen my father's etiquette when inviting guests to a banquet and drinking wine. Every time my father wanted to propose a toast, he would drink first to show his sincerity. How could he let the guest drink first? How about this, Master Zhao, if you drink this cup of wine today, then I'll forget about this matter." Master Zhao knew very well what this wine referred to. His expression changed a few times, and he cursed loudly, "How can you treat me like this? You, Duke Ning, have a large family and business. Are you going to use your power to bully others like this?" His righteous words amused Ning Shu. "Ever since I was young, my father has taught me to be kind to others and to never use my power to bully others. Otherwise, I'll suffer a backlash. However, people are always curious. I really want to know what it's like to bully others. Whether it's sweet or not, I'll give it a try on Master Zhao today." Zigui, pry open his mouth. If he doesn't lick his wine clean today and kowtow to Tan Shaoqing to apologize, then stuff the dagger he was about to use to commit murder into his stomach and eat it. Chapter 4:15. I can't. If I eat this knife, I'll die. I'll definitely die. I'll lick it all down. Master Zhao finally knew fear. He quickly kowtowed to Tan Siwei like an old dog. Then, he endured the stench and lay on the ground, licking the cup of wine that Ning Shu had kicked to the ground. He then wiped the bit of wine that splashed on his face into his mouth. In the end, he couldn't help but vomit. Zigui glared at him in disgust and magnanimously told him to scram. Master Zhao had no face left. He covered his face and ran away in terror. After witnessing Ning Shu's power with their own eyes, no one dared to cause trouble again. They all lowered their heads and stayed far away, not daring to provoke Ning Shu again. Ning Shu looked around indifferently. The bystanders scattered and didn't dare to watch the show. Walking to the drunk Tan Siwei's side, Ning Shu helped him up and said gently, "Tan Siwei, wake up. Let me help you back." "Tan Siwei?" Tan Siwei opened his red eyes and looked at her in a daze for a while. He broke free from her hand and got up from the ground. He walked back to the table where he had been sitting and grabbed the empty wine pot. "Go back for what? Go back where? Apart from a broken mother, where else can I return to in the capital? Tan Siwei's family can be considered to be ruined. Your heart isn't with me, so why are you pretending to care about me? Are you pitying me? I'm not a beggar. Even though I've fallen to this state, I don't care for anyone's pity. Go away. I still want to drink. I haven't had enough. Someone, bring me another pot of wine. Don't worry, my house hasn't been raided. I still have money." The tortoise glanced at them and slowly brought over a new pot of wine. Tan Siwei grabbed the wine pot and poured it down his throat. He choked and coughed violently, but he continued to pour it down. Ning Shu didn't want to see him humiliate himself like this. She frowned and forcefully snatched the wine from him. "Tan Siwei, do you know what you're doing? I know you're heartbroken, and it's hard for you to accept it. But look at you now. Do you still look like you used to? What would Bella think if she were to see you in heaven? How heartbroken would eldest young master be in the underworld? Have you thought about it?" Tan Siwei smiled numbly with tears in his eyes. "Now I am in the human world and they are in the netherworld. We are separated by yin and yang. How can I know what they are thinking? They all left, and I was left alone. In the future, when I tried to run away from home with a kite on my back, there would be no one holding a whip and yelling at me to indulge in wild fantasies. There would also be no one who would remind me to change my bandages on time after I broke my leg and sigh at me, 'Second brother, you mustn't be so reckless in the future.' There would also be no one who would sneak into my room at night crying and asking me, 'Second brother, are you in extreme pain? Can't you share half of the pain with me? Let's go, let's all go.' From now on, no one will care about me anymore. I'm completely free. How happy. Why don't I drink? I want to get drunk to my heart's content as a celebration." Looking at his extremely sad expression, Ning Shu's heart was stabbed. She couldn't help but think of her family and loved ones leaving her one by one. She was the only one left in the world. She also struggled bitterly like this, wishing she could accompany them in death. She pursed her lips, grabbed the wine jug and poured herself a cup. She raised her head and drank it in one gulp. "You want to drink? I'll drink with you. You drink yours. I'll drink on behalf of Bella and eldest young master. How much do you want to drink? I'll drink double tonight." She poured the empty wine cup to Tan Siwei and poured 2 more cups in succession. She endured the spiciness of the wine and drank it all down her throat. Tan Siwei watched her in a daze. He watched as she poured herself cup after cup of wine. She looked as if she was going to drink the entire pot of bitter wine for him. "Ning Shu, you don't have to do this." He reached out to stop her. Ning Shu smiled faintly. "In my heart, although you and I haven't known each other for long, I've already regarded second young master as a close friend. Moreover, when I parted with Miss Bella for the last time, she didn't have any other worries. The only thing she was worried about was you, so she specifically asked me to take care of you. How can I go back on my words? Tan Shaoqing, I won't persuade you tonight." "Why do you have to persuade me?" Tan Siwei's watery eyes swayed. He looked deeply at her and couldn't help but lean over and hug her tightly. It was as if he was hugging his last straw. "Ning Shu, do you know? In the sea of life, I'm the only one. This world is too cold." Ning Shu paused for a moment. She raised her hand and gently patted his back. She said softly, "I know." Chapter 416. Tan Siwei stumbled out of the brothel and walked to a corner to vomit out all the alcohol in his stomach. Ning Shu stood to the side and handed him a handkerchief worriedly. How are you? Are you okay? I'll ask the shop owner for a bowl of hangover soup for you. No need. I'll be fine after vomiting. Tan Siwei waved his hand to call her back. After vomiting, he leaned against the wall and slowly straightened up. With reddened eyes, he looked at the noisy and laughing crowd and the blurry shadows of the lanterns not far away. From this angle, he was much thinner than before. The round face that used to be his trademark quickly faded, and his chin appeared at a sharp angle. He wiped the corner of his mouth with a handkerchief and said self-deprecatingly, "In the past, when my family was prominent, countless people rushed to flatter me and compete to be friends with me. Even if my talent was mediocre, they could still turn black into white with their eyes wide open. They praised me as a rare young talent in the capital and a future famous minister. Now, in just a few short days, I fully understand the hypocrisy of the world. As long as it's someone, even if they don't know me, they will compete to trample me into the mud. It can be said that I've learned something new." Ning Shu's voice was as clear as cold spring water. "When my master was alive, he often said that living in the world is for cultivation. Walking is cultivation, sitting is also cultivation, joy is cultivation, sorrow is also cultivation. Gathering and parting are all the same. They are all things that have to be experienced sooner or later. Perhaps it's not a bad thing to see it clearly now." Tan Siwei lowered his head and laughed softly. "Yes, my father used to teach me that. It's easy to add flowers to brocade, but difficult to provide charcoal in snowy weather. Human nature has always been like this. What's there to be surprised about? What I'm hurt isn't the fame, but it's too much like a dream. In the past, I always thought that my father was too strict. When I was young, whether I was injured, sick, or bullied, he would never bend his knees to coax me. I only thought that he was eager for me and expected better from me. I didn't expect that I wasn't the child he expected to have. But I could feel that even so, he still cared about me. Back then, he was so determined to not let me travel because he was sincerely worried about my safety. He treated me like a child who would never grow up. Later, when I made a few mistakes in my career, it was he who helped me clean up the mess. As for Big Brother, he's only 2 years older than me, but he's always been more mature than me. Every time I did something whimsical and father wanted to teach me a lesson with the whip, he would always stand in front of me and take the punishment for me. Then Joffrey came, and he took care of both of us, and was more like half a tender father to me than a brother. As for Bella, she loved to cry in the beginning. There weren't any girls of the same age in the residence. I thought that all the girls in the world were like that. Every time she cried, she would secretly hide and cry by herself, not letting anyone know. She didn't like me, I knew it the first time we met. Even if she tried to hide it, her eyes couldn't deceive me. But her eyes were filled with disgust and sadness at the same time. She was afraid of the people in the residence and the new environment. So after thinking about it, I still walked over and held her hand. It took me a long time for her to slowly accept me. On my 9th birthday, Bella personally made a pouch for me. On it was embroidered a rabbit with 1 ear and 3 legs. One of its eyes was big and the other was small. It looked very funny, but I was really happy because I finally had a younger sister. That night, everyone was laughing. Even my father patted my head and lifted me up into the sky. That night, I really thought that we were the most harmonious family in the capital. Tan Siwei sank into his memories. He smiled and leaned against the tree beside him. Closing his eyes, his smile faded. I didn't expect that it was all a facade that they deliberately created. In the end, they all knew the inside story. I was the only one who happily stayed in the peaceful place that they all pretended to be, like a naive fool. Now that they've finished their act and left one after the other, there's only this mess left. There's also me who was fooled into a fool by them. Tell me, how can I continue to live like this? Chapter 417. Ning Shu looked at the water stains on his face and slowly said, "How can you be a fool? You are their most important light." Miss Bella came to the capital with a vicious aura and walked into the Prime Minister's residence. She treated everyone as an enemy and was full of fear and vigilance towards everything around her. If she didn't meet you and eldest young master, she might have forever been a hedgehog with only hatred in her heart, curling up her body and dealing with the outside world with thorns all over her body. She might have only been able to secretly hide in a corner and cry, unable to learn how to smile. However, you took the initiative to walk over and hold her hand. No matter how cold she was, you didn't give up on her or ignore her. You're the most important person in her life who didn't turn bad because of hatred. Instead, you're the one who's most important to her. As for eldest young master, in the end, he didn't hesitate to commit murder himself. Not only did he want to protect Miss Bella, he also wanted to protect you who fell into the trap. As you said, all these years, he was the one who gave you advice from the side. In his heart, he really dotes on you like a younger brother. As for your father, he went through so many things. He painfully lost his only daughter and had to bring her back to the Prime Minister's residence in fear, raising her in the name of his niece. However, Miss Bella has always been hostile towards him. No one can understand the bitterness he felt. You took the initiative to care for Bella and dispel her vicious aura. This is the greatest comfort to your father, so he was so happy on your birthday. Admittedly, they have been acting all these years, but it is precisely because they care about you and are afraid that you will find out, that they put in so much effort to maintain the peace and harmony between the family. Tan Siwei raised his eyes and hesitantly said, "Is that really the case?" "You are just comforting me." Ning Shu nodded affirmatively. "I promise you that if I am lying, you can break off your relationship with me. As for your father's resignation, he didn't abandon you. It's just that he was overwhelmed by grief and regret. He fell into a deep self-abandonment, unable to face the world, and even more unable to face you. He is unable to face Bella, eldest young master, and Xue Hongyi's memorial tablets. If he doesn't leave, he won't be able to get through this." "Is that so?" Tan Siwei's lips trembled. Ning Shu said firmly, "Yes." Tan Siwei raised his head and looked at the clear and bright moon in the transparent blue screen. Unknowingly, something gloomy seemed to slowly dissipate. He let out a long sigh and finally showed his usual gentle and calm smile. "I hope it is as you said." A moment later, he turned around and said, "By the way, there's something I haven't had the chance to tell you. I think it might be something very important to you." "What happened?" "That day, I said that Heir Xiaohou was injured by my personal servant. Actually, that's not the case. The truth of that day was that I had seen through Bella's secret, but I was afraid that you would find out, so I secretly investigated and found the straw hut where Xue Hongyi had once lived. It was also the straw hut that my father often went to mourn alone. There, I met a black-clothed person with unknown identity. She knew everything about Bella and used it to threaten me. She wanted me to help her deal with you, otherwise, she would expose Bella and make her die without a burial place. At that time, I didn't agree, but coincidentally, you just happened to come out from there. Thus, a series of events happened. After learning the unexpected secret, Ning Shu's expression immediately became serious. Did Shaoqing notice the black-clothed person's gender and characteristics? Tan Siwei nodded. Such a person suddenly appeared. At that time, I was very vigilant, so I paid special attention. It was a woman. Judging from her voice and the way she spoke, she was around 30 years old or older. Although she deliberately wore a black mask to hide her identity, her words and actions couldn't hide her body shape. For example, her threatening and persuasive words, her back was very straight when she walked, and her chin was naturally raised when she spoke. All of these showed that her identity was very unusual. Especially one detail: when she walked, her hands would be clasped in front of her abdomen. Every step she took was measured with a ruler. Compared to ordinary madams and misses, she was several times more restrained. I suspect that she is very likely from the palace. Chapter 418. Tan Siwei continued, "At that time, I deliberately tested her and targeted our Tan family. However, our Tan family unintentionally offended a certain concubine, so we asked Mama for guidance. At that time, her reaction was very strange, as if she had been greatly humiliated. She sarcastically replied to me, 'You think I'm a palace maid? Let me tell you, I should be the most honorable woman in the world. The most honorable woman in the world. Ning-Shu frowned and fell into deep thought. After Tan Siwei finished speaking, he felt much better. He stood in the same wind as Ning-Shu for a long time. He hesitantly asked, in a few days, it will be the 7th day of Big Brother and Bong Wei's death. If you have time, can you accompany me to send them off? Ning-Shu pulled herself out of deep thought and nodded without thinking. Of course, I will definitely be there on that day. Tan Siwei calmed down and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He smiled and said, that's great, Ning-Shu. Thank you. Ning-Shu smiled calmly and said, Xiaoqing, why are you being so polite with me? I've said before that I have long regarded you as a close friend in my heart. If you're so polite, you'll make us estranged. A close friend. Tan Siwei's eyes flashed and he smiled faintly. You're right. Between friends, always saying thanks makes us estranged. In that case, I won't be like this in the future. I'm fine now. It's not good for a girl like you to stay in a brothel for too long. Moreover, it's already late. It's better to go back early. What about you? I've been too dispirited these past 2 days. I've done many ridiculous things. I need to reflect on my mistakes and slowly go back. Don't worry, I'm a man. Nothing will happen to me. Ning-Shu nodded. All right then. I'll go back to the residence with the servant girl first. If Xiaoqing encounters any trouble, feel free to look for me. I'll do my best. No problem. I'll definitely be thick-skinned and disturb you often. Tan Siwei waved at her with a smile and watched her leave. In his eyes, which were bigger because of his thinness, her reflection was as clear as the lake water in late autumn. Step by step, she slowly blended into the colorful lights of Shi City and gradually disappeared at the end of the road. His self-deprecating chuckle was also swept away by the wind and drifted into the deepest clouds of the night. Ning-Shu, you're good in every way, but unfortunately, you don't like me. In the West Town, a famous brothel had fallen, and soon other brothels had used all kinds of means to take its place. Miss Ying Shui, who had nothing to do with this case, stood in the center of Shi City and stared blankly for a long time. In the end, she numbly and sadly sent herself to another brothel. She held her peeper and sang in a private room for guests, who would throw away time so easily. What's the matter in my heart? The cup is always empty, and the reed flowers fly everywhere. Why do you miss him? He did not receive a letter from Yu-Hong. The night is boundless, it should be like a dream of the living soul. The night wind blew, and the lights were flickering. Her heart was also in a daze. Walking out of Shi City, Ning-Shu boarded the carriage and was ready to leave. She did not expect to see a familiar figure standing under a crepe myrtle flower tree. The tipsy night wind brushed the branches of the flowers, silently teasing his shoulders and scattering petals on the ground. Ning-Shu saw him and her eyes lit up. She lifted her skirt and ran over. Why are you here? Xiaoqing raised his head and looked in her direction. His thin lips opened slightly. I heard that the little bodyguard in my mansion made a name for himself in Shi City tonight. How can I not come to pay my respects and broaden my knowledge? He was so observant and alert that nothing could be hidden from him. Ning-Shu was slightly surprised. How do you know everything? She did not know why, but Xiaoqing did not seem to be in a good mood tonight. Why, you don't want me to know? Ning-Shu explained. No, what I mean is that you have not recovered from your serious injuries. This kind of trivial matter is not worthy of your attention. You should be recuperating in your mansion. The wind is so strong at night. What are you doing out here? But Xiaoqing frowned slightly and corrected her. None of the matters related to you are insignificant. Chapter 419. His words made Ning-Shu's heart melt like a candy painting. She secretly curled her lips and reached out to pick up a flower petal on his shoulder. She said softly, "Then how long have you been here? Why didn't you tell me?" Xiaoqing used his bamboo cane to test the surroundings. He turned and walked forward. "You were busy playing the hero saving the beauty. How would you dare to disturb me?" The jealousy in his tone was too obvious. It was so obvious that she couldn't ignore it even if she wanted to. Ning-Shu hurriedly followed him and looked at him. She reached out and gently poked his arm. Hey, are you unhappy? You know that he's been in trouble recently. He's not feeling well. I can't sit by and do nothing. Yes, you're his legitimate fiancé. Of course, you can't sit by and do nothing. Xiahou Qing smiled faintly and said coldly, then you should go back. Your Tan Shaoqing needs you very much right now. The way he acted when he was jealous turned out to be so childish, just like a child's. It was completely different from his usual indifferent, distant, and strategy-making attitude. This contrast made Ning Xu snicker. So the Crown Prince of Nanping is so petty. I only treat him as a brother and a good friend. You know, I don't like him. Xiahou Qing asked, then who do you like? Ning Xu blinked. You don't know? Xiahou Qing flatly denied. I don't know. Ning Xu was anxious. How can you not know? If you don't say it, I won't know. Ning Xu frowned. Then what about you? You didn't say who you like, right? You treated me like that in front of so many people on the street this afternoon. Do you know that I'll be criticized? Although her reputation had long been tarnished to the point of being worthless, she still had to use it against Xiahou Qing at this time. Xiahou Qing stopped in his tracks and turned his face to the side, as if separated by a thick layer of black brocade, seriously and cautiously looked at her. I won't. Tomorrow, I will have Tianwen announce to the capital that I, Xiahou Qing, admire the eldest miss of the Ning family, Ning Xu. It was one-sided, but you disdained it. At that time, all the infamy will fall on me, and you won't be troubled in the slightest. You, in everyone's eyes, he was standing in the clouds, unreachable, but he actually lowered himself to the ground for her. Ning Xu couldn't help but be shaken. Her nose turned sour, and she opened her mouth to say, you did it on purpose, didn't you? You said those words on purpose, including standing under the flowering tree to wait for me. You could have stayed in the carriage, but you chose to stand in a position where I could sense you the moment I came out. You're still seriously injured, but you still insist on standing. And during the day, your face was so pale, but you still came out of the manor to meet me on the street. You wanted to use this method to move me, to make me feel guilty, and to make me unable to refuse you. After being exposed, Xiahou Qing's expression turned sluggish. He picked up his pace and walked forward, coldly mocking, yes, I did it on purpose. What, do you think I'm scheming, sinister, and despicable? Then you should stay away from me. Ning Xu grabbed the back of his hand and forcefully shook her head. She loudly said, I won't. I'll tell you, I, Ning Xu, have a twisted personality, and I like people like you. The more sinister, the better. I'm also not a good person, so you're a good match for me. Xiahou Qing's chest trembled violently. His body tensed up as he suppressed his emotions. He restrained his voice and said, I'll only give you one chance to go back on your word. You have to think it through. If you go back on your word in the future, I won't give you another chance. Ning Xu shook her head, her voice unprecedentedly firm. I used to hesitate, but that day when I was trapped in the underground palace, I thought it through. There are some things that I shouldn't waver. Otherwise, not only will I not be able to benefit from it, I'll be worried and unable to accomplish anything. If I can't grasp what's already at hand, how can I grasp those who are desperately chasing after me? So there's no need to think about it. Instead, you should think about it. My Ning family's current situation isn't very good. If you get involved with me, you might be in a difficult situation. Before she could finish speaking, her hand was suddenly firmly grasped. A strong force pulled her into his embrace. Her nose was filled with the refreshing and elegant scent of his body. It smelled very good. Xiahou Qing tightly held her in his embrace, as if he wanted to melt her into his life, melt her into his flesh and blood. That day in the underground palace, she hugged him to keep him warm and gave him air to save his life. He had actually vaguely heard what she said. He was a half-dead person and shouldn't have disturbed her. But in the end, he couldn't control himself. He had never been selfish for himself in his life, but this time, he wanted to be selfish for once. Chapter 420. It was indeed the most lively place in the capital city at night. A large number of colorful streamers illuminated the place as if it was daytime, but it was more colorful than daytime, dazzling and blurring. In the evening breeze, the fragrance of crepe myrtle flowers was like a jar of 18-year-old flower wine that was knocked over. With a slight smell, one would be drunk in this charming and gentle scene. The shadow of the trees was also slightly tipsy. It swayed slowly and sprinkled a rain of flowers, falling on the two people's bodies, hair, and tight arms. The immortals who had lived in the heavenly palace for a long time had just seen the 7 emotions and 6 desires of mortals. They were like being poisoned and never looked back. It was so strong that they seemed to want to take revenge for thousands of years of loneliness. His chest was hot and his voice became hoarse, but he still tried to restrain himself. From now on, you can only put me in your eyes. In addition to your family, your heart can only be tied to me. Otherwise, I will kill you. Ning Shu, I ask you for the last time, have you really thought it through? Ning Shu hugged his back, chuckled, and comforted him as if coaxing a little boy who lacked a sense of security. Yes, I have. I really have. Are you an old man? How many times do you need me to say it clearly? Also, don't scare me with words. Do you think I will be scared? You are too naive. Under the black brocade with cloud patterns, Xiaoho Qing's long eyelashes moved. He almost cherished the back of Ning Shu's head. If I can, I really hope that I am an old man in his 70s. This means that we have spent a lifetime together and lived together until our hair turned white. 2 shallow dimples appeared on Ning Shu's cheeks, and she said softly and firmly, "Don't worry, we will. We will definitely be able to detoxify you, and we will definitely be able to walk together until the day you are old." Oh my God, I don't want to look, I don't want to look. Shi Yang, who was not far behind, saw this and his eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. He didn't want to look, so he quickly opened his eyes and stretched out his 5 fingers to cover Huemore's face. Huemore was watching with relish. Suddenly, he was interrupted and began to quarrel with him. "Hey, why are you covering my face? Let go." Shi Yang had a weird look on his face and said with righteous indignation, "How could Shiziyi be like this with Lady Ning? Like that, is simply immoral. Unbearable to look at. Not suitable for children." He blurted out 7 or 8 incongruous idioms in one go. It was obvious that he was stunned by the scene in front of him. Huemo crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at him as if he was looking at a country bumpkin. "What do you mean? They just hugged each other. Don't make a fuss. I saw them kissing this afternoon." Shizi held Lady Ning's chin and lowered his head. Their lips touched. After kissing him, he even said to Lady Ning. Huemo bent his 2 thumbs and touched each other. He described vividly and excitedly. Shi Yang looked as if he was struck by lightning. He grabbed his hair in disbelief. "What? I am as pure as ice and as pure as jade, untainted by a single speck of dust. The noble prince of the Chu family are. How could this be? How could he not be clean? I don't accept it. Ning Shu, let go of my Shizi." As soon as he called out, his mute acupoint was hit by someone. Zigui held her sword with both hands and raised her eyebrows. She walked out from behind them in disgust. "Shut up, you are so noisy." As soon as Shi Yang saw her, his first reaction was to shrink his neck. The second reaction was to quickly raise his head and stick out his chest. He used a questioning sound to protest why she treated him like this. Zigui said coldly, "You are a big man. You are so unreasonable all day long. You might as well be a woman." After saying that, she thought for a while and changed her mind. "Forget it. If you are a woman, I am afraid that you will not be able to get married for the rest of your life. You can only go to the temple to be a nun. Being a nun will only disturb the peace of Buddhism. It is better not to commit sins." Shi Yang was so angry that his eyes turned white. He almost fainted. After a while, he remembered that his hands were not restrained, so he unsealed his acupoint. He smiled angrily and approached Zigui. He looked down at her and said, "Ha! You dare to doubt that I am not a man? Have you forgotten who slept with you that night?" These shocking words instantly caused everyone present to be flabbergasted, and their jaws almost dropped to the ground. Zigui's snow-white face turned from white to red and from red to black. She waved her right hand and pulled out her sword and waved it at Shi Yang. "Shut up, you want to die." Seeing this, Shi Yang immediately ran away. He covered his head and ran away. I forgot that I promised you that I would not say anything about that night. I am sorry. But you forced me to do this. Put down your sword. My mother told me not to hit a woman. Don't treat me as a woman. Let's fight to the death. Are you not a woman? Your body is soft, and your hair is fragrant. I will shut up, I will shut up. That sword is so sharp. Don't cut it. Among the chaos, Hui Mo complained miserably, Shi Yang, we clearly promised that beautiful women are tigers. We brothers will not marry and we will eat and play until we are old. Why did you break your promise halfway? You liar, I hate you. Chapter 421. On the way back to the mansion, Shi Yang, who was beaten black and blue, waved his whip and drove the carriage miserably. Hui Mo, whose heart was hurt too much, got the right to rest. He sat in the carriage and accompanied Ning Shu to eat and drink. He peeled a grape and threw it into his mouth comfortably. Isn't the most honorable woman in the world the Empress? Is it really the imperial concubine Jiang, who failed to compete with the Empress for the Crown Prince 22 years ago? Ning Shu held her cheeks with her hands, pursed her lips, and shook her head. According to this logic, it is very likely that it is her. But there are still many things that don't make sense. Everyone knows that imperial concubine Jiang abandoned the Cold Palace 22 years ago after she failed to compete for the Crown Prince. That place is heavily guarded. How can it be so easy to get out? Moreover, she and Cao who have a blood feud. Cao who is ruthless and takes pleasure in torturing her every day. How can he let her go easily? Moreover, the direction of this sentence is too obvious. As long as you know a little about the past, your first reaction will be to associate it with imperial concubine Jiang. That person has worked hard for many years to gather and train confidants everywhere. How can she reveal her identity so easily? It seems too deliberate. Xiahou Qing's face was as smooth as water, but one thing should be right. She is definitely a person in the palace. Maybe she is a concubine in the imperial harem, or she may be someone who hides deeper and we can't think of it. I also think so. From Yu Zhao's accident to the fall of imperial concubine Qi, and the old affairs of the Shui family, if she is not a person in the palace, there is no way for her to know all the secrets in it. And there is no way for her to reach so far and stir up so much trouble. And many of the clues we have at present point to the imperial harem. But we still need to think carefully about which one of the 3,000 palaces in the imperial harem she is. Ning Shu stretched out her fingers and wrote one by one on the small table. She listed all the suspects in the imperial harem in order and then screened them. But there were more than 10,000 people in the palace. There were hidden dragons and crouching tigers. None of them were easy to deal with. The person who hid behind the curtain and played with people's hearts in the palm of his hand, who exactly were you? On a small square table, the surface was dry and wet, wet and dry again. Ning Shu had written down all the suspicious names and eliminated them one by one. The names became fewer and fewer until there were only a few left. No longer hearing the sound of Ning Shu writing, Xiahou Qing sipped a cup of tea and said as if he could read her mind, "You already have a suspect in mind, don't you?" Ning Shu raised her head, her eyes glimmering with amber light. "You also have a guess, don't you?" Xiahou Qing's lips curled up slightly. The two of them didn't say a word, but it was as if they had exchanged a few words. Only they knew about this, and no one else could detect it. Hearing this, Hui Mo was confused. The grape in his hand was no longer sweet. He spat out the grape skin angrily and muttered, "My two masters, who are you talking about? Can you also take care of us, the ordinary people with mediocre minds?" Ning Shu patted his shoulder to comfort him. "Don't worry. You'll understand as soon as you hear it. The emperor is getting older in recent years. If he takes action at this sensitive time, people can't help but think of that." "You mean to seize?" Hui Mo almost blurted out. He was afraid that the wall had ears, so he lowered his voice and said weakly, "Seize the throne?" Ning Shu was amused by his cautious demeanor. Today, in the imperial harem, although there are many imperial concubines, their positions can be considered respectable. There are not many who have given birth to imperial children and have the power to compete for that position. In the past, Consort Wan was a strong opponent, but she died under the influence of many forces. Consort Qi came from a noble family and gave birth to the fourth prince, but later on, he also went crazy. The third prince is waiting to be beheaded. His mother, Consort Wan, is not a very capable person. The seventh prince Xiao Yunsen is unrestrained and unrestrained, but he has the temperament of Prince Ku. His mother's family, concubine Ju, is low-key and introverted. She eats vegetarian food and chants to Buddha all year round. The last one is the eighth prince Xiao Yunjin, who has just turned 15. He is the youngest and usually doesn't attract much attention. His mother, Wei Shuyi, also doesn't have a high position. What's interesting is that his mother's family happens to be in charge of the treasury of the Ministry of War. Hearing this, Huemo's eyes widened. His brain turned a few times before he suddenly realized. Oh, you mean the knife that Xueran used to kill Wen Huiniang? Ning Shu nodded approvingly. Wen Huiniang's death allowed us to find two pieces of evidence, the token of the seventh prince's residence and the knife of the Ministry of War's new style. This hint is really thought-provoking. After she finished speaking, she looked at Xiahou Qing. What about you? Do you suspect anyone else besides her? There is one more. Who? Princess Royal, Xiao Mingxue. Chapter 422. Upon hearing this name, Ning Shu frowned in shock. Her knowledge of this eldest princess was limited to the previous emperor's eighth princess, Jin Sheng's most beloved younger sister. After Jin Sheng ascended the throne, he immediately conferred her the title of Protector Princess. The princess residence's treatment was even higher than that of a legitimate princess, causing a bunch of old pedants from the Ministry of Rights to be unhappy. However, this did not affect Xiao Mingxue at all. She sat on the eldest princess's seat as steadily as Mount Tai, and even Empress Cao had to be respectful to her. Her life could be considered smooth sailing, and she was even betrothed to the most elegant and talented Tanhua in the imperial examinations, attracting the envy of countless unmarried daughters. If one had to talk about the biggest setback, it would be the death of a son, leaving only a daughter who was treated like a treasure and raised in the palm of his hand. However, not only did this not affect the prince consort's feelings for her, he even pitied her even more. This deeply in love couple was the role model for all the aristocratic families in the capital. It was not an exaggeration to say that such a person was a winner in life. Ning Shu really could not understand why she would be related to this series of cases. Why would I think of her? She had once heard her master mention that there was a deeper meaning behind Jin Sheng conferring her the title of Protector Princess. It was because during the palace coup 25 years ago, Xiao Mingxue had contributed greatly to His Majesty's success in seizing the throne. This kind of person had already climbed to the top of her position and obtained extreme respect and glory. Why would she plan these things? Could it be that she wanted to be the empress? After snatching the position of the empress, she would pass the throne to her husband or that delicate little princess. Ning Shu did not know whether to laugh or cry. This was too absurd. However, a thought quickly rushed into her mind. She said in shock, "You're saying that she did this for her younger brother, Prince Ku?" This was too ridiculous, but after thinking about it carefully, it did not seem to be that ridiculous. Eldest Princess Xiao Mingxue was famous in the capital for treating her younger brother, who was born from the same mother. When Xiao Minglan was just born, his mother, Madame Sun, passed away. When Xiao Mingxue was 12 years old, she took on the responsibility of raising her younger brother. He could be said to have been brought up by Xiao Mingxue. After Xiao Mingxue and Prince Consort Han got married, Xiao Minglan stayed in the princess residence until he was 16 years old. He then left the princess residence to establish his own family. It was not entirely impossible for such an elder sister who treated her younger brother like her own son to do such a thing in a moment of paranoia. Xiahou Qing moved his finger and ordered Hui Mo to take out an old file that had been prepared in the box and handed it to Ning Shu. There is one more thing that you may not know. Back then, Empress Xiaoju pitied the siblings for being young and lonely. She often summoned them to the Phoenix Algae Palace to take care of them. Receiving the old file that a palace maid had personally written, Ning Shu said in surprise, "I have always heard people say that Empress Ju was arrogant because she was pampered. She was crazy and bloodthirsty. She personally killed the previous crown prince and nearly 100 people in the Phoenix Algae Palace. She did not even let off her own daughter, who was only a few years old. When the people talked about her, their expressions would change. I never thought that she would have such a soft side." Hearing her soft voice, it was like a fluffy rabbit gently scratching his chest. Xiahou Qing curled his lips slightly. The human heart is the most complicated thing. When a person treats you with kindness, you will thank them profusely, worship them, and wish that you could do everything to praise them. When a person is your enemy, you will naturally portray them as the most vicious person in the world. The so-called history books were written by the victors, and this was how they were written. But how can there be so many people in the world who are completely black and white? These days, Tianwen went to find many palace maids who were released from the previous dynasty and are still alive. According to them, Empress Ju is not a person who disregards human life. On the contrary, she is gentle and magnanimous most of the time. She is more compassionate towards the lowly palace maids. Ning Shu clenched her fist in the palm of her hand, as if she had just woken up from a dream. According to this, Empress Ju was clearly indebted to Xiao Mingxue and her younger brother, but she later betrayed Empress Ju and assisted His Majesty to become the protector princess. You can say that. Ning Shu's eyes deepened. Then, she once stayed by Empress Ju's side for so long. Does that mean that she may have come into contact with that secret poison, the kiss of the plum blossom? Chapter 423. In addition, Xiao Mingshue's son-in-law, Han Qi, held the Minister of War's seal. No one else could get the new dagger more easily than him. Was it really her? The fog in front of her was getting thicker and thicker, blocking her line of sight. She couldn't even see her fingers in front of her and couldn't help but feel a bone-piercing chill. A hand reached out and placed in front of her. That hand was slender and white, with distinct joints. There was a thin layer of calluses on the fingertips. It wasn't as warm as an ordinary person's, but it was more reliable and powerful than anyone else's. In front of her, he said, whether it's Xiao Mingxue or others, no one can easily control our lives. If fire comes, I will extinguish it. If ice comes, I will shatter it. I want to see who dares to win this game of chess from my, Xiahou Qing's, hands. He had always been calm and indifferent to life and death. It was rare for him to show his strong side, making Ning Shu respect him. In the carriage, a wind lamp swayed slightly. The candlelight reflected the fiery red pomegranate pattern on the glass wall, leaving a bright red color on his face. He was full of fighting spirit and vitality, like the flames of a phoenix's nirvana, shining brightly and never extinguishing. Ning Shu looked at him and then looked at his hand. It was as if the ice that had covered her body just now had disappeared. She smiled and put her hand in his palm. Okay, I believe you. Hui Mo, who was completely ignored, chewed the grape in his mouth and turned his face away angrily. Evil. All of them were disgusting to death. Why did they all come to bully a lonely child like him? If this continued, he would run away from home. When she heard his indignant muttering, Ning Shu couldn't bear to give him some attention. By the way, Hui Mo, what did you find out about the sleeping clothes that old consort you left for 13th princess? Hearing this, Hui Mo's head drooped and he said with a sad face, Damn, don't mention it. I get a headache every time you mention it. The clues that old princess consort you left behind are too obscure. It's just a handful of blood-stained red threads. These days, I've tried almost 20 different poisons and fragrances. In the end, I realized that the blood wasn't mixed with any poison, but the juice of a kind of wisdom flower, also known as the devil's snare flower. This kind of flower is colorless, odorless, and poisonous. I really don't know why she left this for us. Colorless, odorless, and not poisonous. Ning Shu furrowed her brows slightly and fell into deeper thought. About 300 feet away from the carriage, there was a sudden commotion. Hui Mo immediately opened the curtain and looked back. Yo, which family's silk pants are so arrogant, daring to drive a horse carriage on Vermilion Bird Street like this? Wasn't he afraid of attracting Yong Chengwei? Fortunately, it's at night. Otherwise, I would have hit and injured some passers-by. He stretched out his hand and raised the wind lantern with the words Nanping Prince's Mansion. He originally wanted to remind the other party not to act rashly in front of his shizzy. He didn't expect that after he raised the lantern, the other party didn't retreat. Instead, the wheels of the carriage rolled and the horse galloped towards their carriage. Shi Yang hurriedly drove the carriage to avoid colliding with each other. Hey! Shi Yang was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly stopped the carriage and glared at the other party. But before he could denounce them, the curtain of the carriage was lifted, and a young girl in a palace dress with pearls and emeralds on her head impatiently jumped out and ran towards them. When Ning Shu saw her appearance, she was stunned for a moment. 13th Princess? I finally found you. I finally found you. Xiao Zhangping's expression looked extremely anxious. Her pale lips kept trembling, as if she had fallen into a huge panic and was about to cry at any time. Ning Shu walked down from the carriage and went forward to support the trembling princess. She softly comforted her. Princess, don't worry. If there's anything, you can tell me slowly. Xiao Zhangping's eyes turned red. Ning Shu. Xiaoho Shizhi. You must help me. Chapter 424. Xiaoho Qing walked out of the carriage with the help of Hui Mo. She raised her head, and her beautiful face was reflected in Xiao Zhangping's eyes. Tears appeared on her face. She didn't care about anything else and stumbled into Xiaoho Qing's arms. Her tears fell like pearls from a broken necklace. Ning Shu stood at the side with her arms crossed. It would be a lie if she said she wasn't jealous, but she was also curious about what he was going to do with this troublesome 13th princess. Princess, if you encounter any difficulties, just tell me. If I can help you, I will do my best. Xiaoho Qing calmly held her arms and pulled her away from his chest. Xiao Zhangping's eyes were filled with disappointment when she left his arms. Then, Xiaoho Qing comforted her with a handkerchief. It had to be said that this girl was pure and cute. Her love was straightforward and strong, and her hatred was frank and open. She didn't know how to hide her feelings. She was happy after a little coaxing. It was hard to hate her. Ning Shu thought for a moment and walked over to her and stroked her back. Princess, don't worry. Ning Shu will not stand by and do nothing. Xiao Zhongping wiped away the tears on his face and slowly began to narrate. The Southern Yang deputy envoy originally planned to depart tomorrow, but for some reason, he suddenly entered the palace this evening and requested to see me. He even said that he would carefully examine the golden body before departing tomorrow, so everything was foolproof. He must have heard from somewhere that I was preparing to escape, so he came to warn me. It must be like this. Before he left the palace, he said that the death of the envoy had made his king very dissatisfied. If there was a mistake in the marriage, he didn't know if the princess could bear the consequences. Xiao Zhongping choked with sobs again and looked at the two for help. Tell me, what should I do now? Ning Shu and Xiaoho Qing frowned at the same time. They understood. If that was the case, then the cicada's shell-shedding tactic would not work. Firstly, the case of the envoy's sudden death had just been concluded a few days ago. Although Xue Qiongwei had taken the initiative to return to the Netherworld and Prime Minister Tan had taken the blame and resigned, to a certain extent, the Southern Yang monarch's anger had yet to be appeased. Under such circumstances, if Nanyang were to get hold of another weakness, the saber in Nanyang's hand that was hovering above Great Yu's head would definitely be swung down, causing an immeasurable disaster. Secondly, since the deputy had seen through their plan, there was no chance of success if they continued. However, to let the 13th princess accept her fate and marry into the Southern Yang kingdom to be a puppet for the rest of her life, it was impossible. Now, the situation had reached a dead end. You guys are so smart. You must be able to think of a way, right? Why aren't you saying anything? Seeing that both of them fell into silence at the same time, Xiao Zhangping's face turned paler. He grabbed Xiaoho Qing's sleeves hard and said in a panic, if you really can't do it, child Xiaoho, marry me. As long as you tell Imperial Father that you want to marry me, he will definitely find someone else to replace me in marriage. Child Xiaoho, don't forget that you promised me. As long as I give you the sleeping clothes, you will definitely help me solve the marriage problem. You can't go back on your words. Child Xiaohou. Facing Xiao Zhangping's earnest questioning and pleading eyes, no one could immediately say heartless words to completely cut off her hope. That was equivalent to directly pushing her into the fire pit. But to marry her. Xiahou Qing faced Ning Shu's direction. His black brocade and his cloud-like wide sleeves fluttered in the wind. Ning Shu silently clenched her fists. Chapter 425. Putting her palm back into her sleeve, Ning Shu smiled and said in a casual tone, "Perhaps we can put on a show." Xiao Zhongping nodded vigorously. "Yes. As long as we can deceive father, it will be fine. When the deputy envoy of Southern Yang leaves Great Yu with the other princess, it will not be a problem for your highness to immediately clarify. At that time, what is done cannot be undone. Even if father knows the truth, he will at most punish me. Prince Xiahou, I beg you, please help me. If I really go to Southern Yang, I will die. Prince, do you really have the heart to watch me die?" Xiao Zhangping's voice was full of trembling. For freedom, this little princess who had always been proud threw her high self-esteem in the palm of her hand into the dust. Ning Shu watched silently from the side and couldn't help but feel a little distressed for her. Under Xiao Zhangping's expectant gaze, Xiahou Qing, who had been silent for a long time, finally opened his mouth and said, "I can immediately go to the palace and kowtow to His Majesty to keep the princess, but I'm sorry, I can't cooperate with the princess with this lie." The light in Xiao Zhangping's eyes immediately dimmed. Her face became paler, and she was at a loss. "Why? Is your highness worried about my reputation?" "I don't care. Even if the Jojo knows that I was abandoned by you after being engaged to you, I don't care. As long as I can escape this marriage, even if my reputation is ruined and I am pointed at by thousands of people, I won't mind. Not to mention that it is with you. Not only because of this reason, but also because I already have someone in my heart. I can't let her suffer the slightest grievance. Even if it is just a play, as long as there is a trace of sadness or misunderstanding in her heart, I won't allow it." In the thick ink of the night, Xiahou Qing shook his head, lowered his picturesque eyebrows, and bent his back to Xiao Zhongping. Hui Mo said in astonishment, "Prince." Ning Shu was also stunned. Xiao Zhongping subconsciously took a step back. Xiahou Qing waved his hand to order Huemo and the others to leave. He bent his thin back even deeper. "I'm sorry, Your Highness, if there is anything else that Xiahou Qing can do, I will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. But for this, please forgive Xiahou Qing for not being able to do it." Ning Shu's eyes were slightly moist. She had never seen him like this since she met him. In the eyes of the world, the Crown Prince of Nanping was precocious and ambitious at a young age. When he was 10 years old, he taught the Xiongnu a trick that lasted for 10 years. For such a person, even death could not make him lower his head, but in order to take care of her feelings and not make her sad, he lowered his proud head. Ning Shu couldn't help but feel sour at the tip of her nose. She didn't open her eyes. For a moment, she didn't know whether she was more moved or more distressed. Xiao Zhangping's whole body trembled violently. Her eyes were filled with thick ink-like hatred. She took a few steps back and stretched out her hand. Every word was filled with endless hatred. "Good, good, good, I know. You two have deep feelings for each other and can move heaven and earth, but you want to see me fall into the fire pit. I, Xiao Zhongping, was blind to have misjudged you too. Are you sure that I won't reveal your secret? Anyway, running away from the marriage will lead to death. If I go to the Southern Yang Kingdom, I will die sooner or later. Then I will let you see me die in front of you, princess." Under everyone's shocked gazes, Xiao Zhongping decisively pulled out a dagger from his sleeve and slit his own neck that was as fragile as a reed. Xiahou Qing immediately ordered, "Hui Mo, Shi Yang." Shi Yang was as fast as lightning. He took out a small slingshot and used a stone as a bullet to hit the dagger. Xiao Zhongping reached out to pick it up but was kicked away by Hui Mo. Finally, it fell into Ning Shu's hands. Xiao Zhongping pounced at Ning Shu again. Ning Shu reacted quickly and immediately threw the dagger far away from a courtyard wall. Xiao Zhongping angrily asked, "You won't save me or let me die. What do you want me to do? Since old princess you passed away, I have been very miserable. Why do you even want to bully me?" She raised her hand and took out a silver hairpin from her cloud-like hair. "Ning Shu, you think that after throwing away my dagger, I have no other way? If I want to die, no one can stop me." Chapter 426. Ning Shu looked at the blood dripping down her snow-white neck like rose petals. Her eyes were like torches and her mind was like lightning. In a flash, an idea flashed through her mind. She said in a clear voice, "If the princess is not afraid of death, then it would be a pity to die here. I have a plan, but I don't know if the princess dares to try it." The sharp tip of the silver hairpin had already pierced through her flesh. Xiao Zhongping stared at her in disbelief. "What plan? Speak." Ning Shu's voice was very steady, her expression very calm. "If the princess is suddenly infected with an epidemic and is in imminent danger, even if you survive the 1,000-li journey and barely manage to marry into southern Yang, the epidemic will still be spread. In this kind of situation, even if His Majesty wants to be stubborn, southern Yang's deputy envoy will think again and again." Xiao Zhongping briefly fell into thought, but quickly shook her head and denied, "But at this time, where can I go to get infected with an epidemic? I heard that southern Yang's diplomatic group has a southern Yang's godly doctor. If I pretend, he will definitely see through it." Ning Shu approached her step by step without batting an eyelid. She softened her voice and said, "Therefore, this epidemic must be real. However, this also means that the princess will have to risk her life. The worst result is that even if the princess escapes the marriage, her life and death will be uncertain. Princess, please reconsider." The silver hairpin in her hand stopped. Xiao Zhongping's eyelashes trembled. She clearly heard Ning Shu's words. A moment later, she clenched her fists tightly. She had already made a decision, no need to reconsider, so be it. Rather than being a bird in a cage, it is better to die in Great Yu's territory. It can be considered staying in my homeland forever. Ning Shu took advantage of the situation and quickly walked over. She took the blood-stained hairpin from her hand and looked at her seriously. She extended her hand and said, "Please rest assured, Princess. Ning Shu swears with her life that we will do everything we can to help the princess pass through this calamity." Xiao Zhongping hesitantly clapped hands with her and said in a trembling voice, "Good, I will believe you once more. If you dare to deceive me again, I will make you regret it." Ning Shu smiled. This subject believes that such a day will never come. "Princess, please get on the carriage. Let's discuss where we should make this crucial move. Huemo, it's your turn now." Hui Mo pulled a long face. "What? Why is it me again?" Sigh, as expected, capable people can't escape the fate of working hard. "Who asked me to be so outstanding? I'm really lonely like the snow." Ning Shu, she smiled and waved her hand, calling him over. She slapped him on the head and said, "Child, you're really arrogant. Come here and let me teach you how to be a good person." Raw. "It hurts. I was wrong, okay?" Sob sob sob. In the blink of an eye, the few people who were about to turn hostile had all sat in the same carriage. Even if Xiao Zhongping was as magnanimous as an ox and didn't care about trifles, he still felt somewhat uncomfortable. On the other hand, Ning Shu was very indifferent. She smiled and pushed the plate of grapes that Hui Mo loved the most in front of him. As the saying goes, give a candy after a slap. The most important thing now is how to catch the epidemic and what kind of epidemic it is. This kind of epidemic must be very contagious. At first glance, it can scare people. The other side is hiding a genius doctor. If the illness is too mild and the other side can easily cure it, we will definitely lose this game. But at the same time, it can't be too dangerous. This is because we need to ensure the safety of Princess Changping to the greatest extent. In this aspect, little brother Hui Mo, you are the expert. I'll have to trouble you to think carefully. Chapter 427. Hui Mo looked at the plate of crispy, sweet, and juicy grapes, cleared his throat and said deliberately, "It can't be solved easily. At the same time, I have to take care of the princess's safety. This is really a bit difficult. Ning Shu looked at him with a teasing smile and pushed a plate of fresh pastries to him. Hui Mo continued to knock his head and thought hard. Oh, let me think about it. Ning Shu poured a cup of tea and handed it to him to moisten his throat. Hui Mo was very happy in his heart and wanted to continue to put on airs, but he heard his shiz's finger gently tapping on the small table. Hui Mo's heart immediately trembled and he quickly retracted his hand that was about to reach out to take the tea. He smiled and said, "There is a way, although it is a little difficult, but I, Hui Mo, will definitely do it. But there is still some risk. If you are not careful, you will be in danger of disfigurement. Your Highness, you have to think about it in advance." Xiao Zhongping, who had been forced to the edge of the cliff, was full of courage. "Just say it. I am not afraid." Old Hui Mo said, "Cowpox. This was an infectious disease that occurred in cattle. It was an acute infection caused by smallpox in cattle. If a human was infected, papules, blisters, and pustules would appear all over the body. It would also be accompanied by symptoms such as fever, headache, chills, and vomiting. It was very similar to the symptoms of smallpox in humans. At first glance, very few people could tell the difference between the two at once. However, the danger was completely different. It was most suitable for this play. Because time is tight, I will add a set of silver beard to speed up the outbreak of the disease. Your Highness, please remember that you can't scratch the herpes during the process of the disease. Otherwise, it will leave a scar." Xiao Zhongping said, "Then where should I get this cowpox?" Hui Mo smiled and said, "Of course." Xiao Zhongping stood in the 5th cattle farm with a weird expression on his face. The hot air from the cows and the wonderful aroma of the cow dung that had not been cleaned up were floating around him. After a whole day of fermenting, it was particularly enchanting in the early summer night. Especially when a majestic black bull by the cow pen heard the sound of a stranger breaking in, it curiously raised its head and looked for a while. Then, it deliberately strolled in front of Xiao Zhongping and enthusiastically gave him a freshly made welcome gift. Xiao Zhongping's vision went black, and his face turned green. He almost exploded. Seeing this, Huemore was moved and smiled. God knows that when he was forced to go to Ju's pigsty to look for clues a few days ago, he also broke down like this. No, it would be 10,000 times worse. That steaming hot sensation and that unique feeling haunted him every night in his dreams like a nightmare. Now, there was finally someone who could empathize with him. He secretly rejoiced in his heart, but on the surface, he spoke up for the old bull with a serious expression. "Your Highness, the princess has the countenance of a flower and the face of the moon. Even the bulls fell head over heels for you when they saw your Highness. They were momentarily agitated. It's understandable, it's understandable. You are a proud daughter of the heavens, so you can't lower yourself to the same level as a beast. Furthermore, his brothers and sisters are very likely to be the princess's saviors. No, saviors. Savior cow. Savior cow." Xiao Zhongping clenched her teeth and closed her eyes. If it wasn't for this damned marriage, how could she, the princess of a country, be reduced to such a sorry state? Therefore, in her heart, she fiercely chewed on those bastards of the southern Yang kingdom 10,000 times. Only then did she mentally prepare herself. With a wooden face, she walked into the cattle pen, unafraid of death. Chapter 428. This cow is very clever. Seeing that it hasn't been punished for bringing such a big gift, it opened its mouth even more arrogantly and moaned at Xiao Zhongping, then pooped again. Xiao Zhongping's green face suddenly turned black. She clutched her chest and almost fainted from anger. She is the dignified 13th princess, a golden branch and jade leaf. How could she be despised by a cow like this? She might as well die. No one can stop her. Hui Mo hurriedly stepped forward and pulled her back. "Your Highness, don't go, calm down, calm down." Under the moonlight, Hui Mo looked back at the cow and said in surprise, "Huh? Princess Zhongping, your luck is really good. It just so happens that this cow has cowpox." After the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, Xiao Zhongping sat on a bench outside the cow pen. Her whole body tensed up. "What do you want me to do next?" Tell me. Hui Mo carefully put aside the cowpox mucus that he spent a lot of effort to collect, then lit a fire and put a sharp knife on the fire. Next, I will make a small cut on your highness's arm and apply the cowpox mucus to your highness's wound. After that, I will wait for Lady Ning and the others to bring the silver beard grass for you to eat. Later, when I cut the wound, it may be a little painful. Princess, please bear with it. Looking at the knife that gradually changed color on the fire, Xiao Zhongping gritted her teeth and rolled up her sleeves. She stretched out her snow-white lotus arm. No problem, you can do it. Under the moonlight, seeing Xiao Zhongping's stiff body and her other hand quietly clenched, Hui Mo blinked and said, Princess, are you afraid? Don't worry, when I was young, I was infected with cowpox by my master. At that time, one of my senior brothers went out to travel and brought back the smallpox virus. My master went to 18 slaughterhouses overnight to find the cowpox scab. He planted the cowpox scab on us and saved our lives. You see, am I not standing in front of you alive and kicking now? So, you can put your heart into your stomach. But starting tomorrow, there will be a lot of blisters on your body. It will be painful and itchy. You must remember not to touch them. Your Highness is so beautiful. If you leave a scar, it will be a pity. You said I'm beautiful? Xiao Zhangping's eyelashes trembled. She raised her glass-like eyes and looked at him with an expression of complete disbelief. She laughed at herself and said, Am I really beautiful? You're lying to me, aren't you? There were a total of 5 sisters in the palace. The 5th royal sister was valiant and straightforward, and had a heroic spirit. She was different from others, and she was the favorite of Father Emperor. The 9th royal sister was knowledgeable and gentle like water, and all the ministers in the court praised her. She had the appearance of a young phoenix. The 12th royal sister was as beautiful as a fairy when she was born, as if she had walked out of a painting. All the young masters in the capital flocked to her. Even the 14th royal sister, who was 2 years younger than me, was intelligent and good at reading people's minds. Only I have no background, no looks, and even my wisdom has not been favored by the heavens. You said I'm beautiful, but even I don't believe it. Listening to her, Hui Mo frowned and disagreed. Although I haven't seen many girls, I have examined countless corpses. Men and women, old and young, I have seen everything. The princess is definitely one of the most beautiful people I have ever seen. How can you belittle yourself like this? Look at your facial features, there is no part that is not beautiful. Especially your lips, they are thin and thick, and the shape is beautiful. Even if you are angry, you are still very beautiful. At least you are better than the corpses I have examined. Ah, I'm not saying that you are only better than those corpses, but not living people. I have seen some of the girls in the Moon Lake and the Search House. You are also more beautiful than them. Ah, Your Highness, don't be angry. I didn't mean to compare you with those girls. Bah. Look at my broken mouth. What I mean is that Your Highness is very beautiful, and your temperament is simple and straightforward. You dare to love and hate. You are different from those people in the palace. It's just that you don't look confident. If you are more confident, you will be more dazzling. Under the moonlight, the boy's eyes were like 2 obsidian stones, clearly falling into the spring water. Just by looking at it, you will be infected by the sincere brilliance inside. Xiao Zhangping's heart was unconsciously warmed. Chapter 429. After a short moment of astonishment, Xiao Zhongping smiled. Thank you for your compliment. In my impression, other than my mother and old Princess Yu, no one else has said that I am good. They only said that I am simple-minded and that I am arrogant and reckless just because I am a princess. I even shamelessly took the initiative to pursue a man who disdained me. So, thank you very much. Being thanked by a girl so solemnly, Hui Mo's face burned. He scratched his head and said, Haha, no need, no need. Your Highness is too polite. Xiao Zhongping pinched the corner of her dress and gathered her courage to ask, Then can you tell me, if I am as good as you said, why doesn't Your Highness like me? As a lonely young man, Hui Mo's heart was broken into pieces when he was asked about his feelings. He hissed in pain and patted his head. He racked his brain for a long time and almost exhausted all his wisdom before he said, "I think, maybe it is because you are not destined to be the one. Just like how the world is so big and there are so many good people in Jojo and hundreds of countries. It is not easy to fall in love with someone who is beautiful and has a good temperament. Everyone should have their own destined person." Before meeting him, all the people they knew were nothing more than fleeting clouds. After meeting him, their souls found a place to return to. After that, he was the one sitting, walking, eating, sleeping, living, and dying. The one who wanted to cross the bridge of helplessness together with him was also the one who wanted to cross the bridge of helplessness. There is no reason, regardless of beauty or ugliness, regardless of pros and cons, it should be like this. Your Highness should be like this to Lady Ning. Your Highness may not know, but I have been with Your Highness for 10 years. Your Highness was not like this in the past. Since he was infected with that disease, he fell into a state that was completely different from ordinary people. As his 5 senses disappeared one by one, it was as if his 7 emotions and 6 desires were slowly dissipating as well. Especially after he couldn't even see his eyes, he didn't say a single word that day. He sat alone on the bed for an entire night. He would respond to whoever came to talk to him, but anyone could tell that he had changed even more. His entire person revealed a grey color. He had no desires, no sorrow, no joy, as if he was prepared to welcome death. Does the princess know how terrifying that state is? He didn't care about what he ate, whether it was what he used to hate the most, as long as he was full. He didn't care about what he wore every day, the furnishings in the house, and everything around him. After all, he couldn't see. Other than drinking tea and raising birds, he had abandoned all his previous hobbies. Several times, we collected new scrolls from the market and mustered up the courage to read them to him, but we were all chased out by him. If it wasn't for his obsession to find the culprit who poisoned him, I would have suspected that he was going to become a monk and become a monk. That was until he met Lady Ning. When they first met, the Crown Prince almost killed her. I was stunned. He could have ordered me to do it, but he didn't. Really, that was the first time in almost a year that the heir apparent had shown such strong emotions. Other than towards the murderer, it was the only time he had shown such strong emotions. Less than 2 days later, Lady Ning came again. She had offended the Crown Prince and stolen his things, yet she still had the cheek to beg the Crown Prince to cooperate with her. I thought that the Crown Prince would kick her out of the house, but he actually agreed. He broke his vow twice with the same person. At the time, I thought that there was a problem. Who would have thought that my premonition would come true? Gradually, the aura of life on the Crown Prince's body grew stronger and stronger. He could be angry, speechless, disgusted, impatient, worried, happy, and even smile. It was as if someone had added oil to a flame that was about to be extinguished, causing it to burn again. So, it really wasn't that the princess wasn't good in any way, but that the heavens had destined them to be together. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.